Sarah's fingers curled around the handle of her mop, the familiar weight a constant reminder of her place in the world. The gleaming marble floors of the Grand Lux Hotel reflected the opulent chandeliers overhead, casting a soft glow on her weathered hands. At 32, Sarah had spent more than a decade navigating the invisible corridors of the hospitality industry, a ghost among the living, privy to the secrets of the rich and famous, yet never truly a part of their world. As she methodically worked her way through the lobby, Sarah's eyes darted from one guest to another, observing their designer clothes and carefree laughter. A group of businessmen in tailored suits huddled near the concierge desk, their voices hushed as they discussed million-dollar deals. To her left, a young couple draped in jewels giggled over flutes of champagne, celebrating what appeared to be a recent engagement. Sarah had long ago learned to tune out the constant buzz of activity around her. It was a survival mechanism, really. The less she engaged, the less it hurt to be reminded of the vast chasm between her life and theirs. But today, something felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that seemed to crackle just beneath the surface of the hotel's polished veneer. As she rounded the corner towards the elevators, Sarah caught sight of a striking woman in her early 40s, her red hair cascading over bare shoulders, exposed by an emerald green cocktail dress. The woman's eyes darted nervously around the lobby before she stepped into the elevator, jabbing at the button for the penthouse suite. Sarah frowned, pausing in her work. Something about the woman's demeanor set off alarm bells in her mind. Years of observing human behavior had honed Sarah's instincts, and right now, those instincts were screaming that something was amiss. Shaking her head, Sarah tried to dismiss the nagging feeling. It wasn't her place to question the guests or their motives. Her job was simple: clean, polish, and fade into the background. Nothing more, nothing less. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself drawn repeatedly to the penthouse floor. She told herself it was just routine, that the most expensive suites required extra attention. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. The red-haired woman's anxious expression had lodged itself in Sarah's mind, refusing to let go. It was nearing the end of her shift when Sarah finally found herself outside the penthouse suite. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The "Do Not Disturb" sign hung ominously. But hotel policy dictated that rooms be checked at least once a day, regardless of guest preferences. Taking a deep breath, Sarah knocked softly. "Housekeeping," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. When no response came, she used her master key to enter, pushing the cleaning cart ahead of her. The suite was a vision of luxury, all cream-colored silk and gleaming mahogany. Sarah moved quietly through the space, her eyes taking in every detail. A half-empty bottle of expensive scotch sat on the coffee table, accompanied by 2 used glasses. The bed was rumpled, pillows strewn haphazardly across the floor. As Sarah bent to retrieve a discarded towel, she heard muffled voices coming from the bathroom. Her heart rate quickened as she recognized the red-haired woman's voice, now laced with an urgency that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Udi, it has to be done tonight. Do you understand?" the woman hissed. "James can't survive that sailing trip. Make it look like an accident, just like we planned." Sarah's blood ran cold. She stood frozen, the towel clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The woman, Emily, she now recalled from the guest registry, was planning a murder. And not just any murder, but the killing of James Blackwood, one of the hotel's most prominent and wealthy patrons. The sound of movement from the bathroom jolted Sarah back to reality. She scrambled to finish her tasks, her mind racing with the implications of what she'd just overheard. As she wheeled her cart out of the suite, her thoughts were a jumbled mess of fear and indecision. What should she do? Go to the police? Warn Mr. Blackwood? The weight of this knowledge pressed down on her, threatening to crush her under its enormity. Back in the safety of the employee locker room, Sarah sank onto a bench, her head in her hands. She was just a cleaner, invisible to the likes of James Blackwood and his murderous wife. Who would believe her word against theirs? But as she changed out of her uniform, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was now irrevocably entangled in something far bigger than herself. The image of Emily's nervous glances in the lobby replayed in her mind, along with the chilling words she'd overheard. Sarah's finger hovered over the screen of her battered smartphone, the number for the local police department glowing accusingly. With a frustrated groan, she shoved the phone back into her pocket. She needed more time to think, to plan her next move carefully. As she stepped out into the cool evening air, Sarah cast one last glance at the towering facade of the Grand Lux Hotel. Its glittering windows seemed to mock her, holding the secrets of its inhabitants just out of reach. Little did Sarah know that her decision in the coming hours would not only change the course of James Blackwood's life, but would set in motion a chain of events that would unravel the very fabric of her own existence. The humble hotel cleaner was about to step into a world of wealth, deceit, and long-buried secrets, a world that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her very understanding of who she truly was. The sun had barely risen over the New York City skyline when Sarah found herself back at the Grand Lux Hotel, her mind still reeling from the events of the previous day. The weight of what she'd overheard pressed down on her shoulders, making each step feel like a monumental effort. As she pushed through the employee entrance, the familiar scent of cleaning supplies and freshly laundered linens did little to calm her nerves. Sarah's fingers trembled as she punched in her time card, her eyes darting nervously around the break room. Did anyone suspect that she knew something? Could they see the guilt and indecision written across her face? "Morning, Sarah," called out Marco, one of the bellhops. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Rough night?" Sarah forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just didn't sleep well," she lied, grabbing her cleaning cart. "Nothing a strong cup of coffee won't fix." As she made her way through the hotel's winding corridors, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. Should she go to the police? Would they even believe her? And what if Emily somehow found out that Sarah had overheard her plans? The thought sent a chill down her spine. Sarah's internal debate was interrupted by the soft ding of the elevator. The doors slid open, revealing none other than Emily herself. The redhead's eyes locked onto Sarah for a brief moment, a flicker of recognition passing across her face before she swept past, the scent of expensive perfume lingering in her wake. Heart-pounding, Sarah wheeled her cart into the elevator, pressing the button for the penthouse floor. She needed to see the suite again to confirm that what she'd heard wasn't just a product of her overactive imagination. As she approached the Blackwood suite, Sarah's hand hesitated over the doorknob. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly. "Housekeeping," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. When no response came, Sarah used her master key to enter, pushing the cleaning cart ahead of her. The suite looked much as it had the day before, with one notable exception. James Blackwood himself was seated at the desk, his brow furrowed as he pored over a stack of documents. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," Sarah stammered, backing towards the door. "I didn't realize anyone was in." "I can come back later." James looked up, his piercing blue eyes softening as they met Sarah's. "No need," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "Please, go about your work. I won't be in your way." Sarah nodded, her heart racing as she began her routine. She could feel James's eyes on her as she moved about the room, straightening pillows and dusting surfaces. The weight of her knowledge pressed down on her, threatening to burst forth at any moment. As she bent to retrieve a fallen coaster, Sarah's elbow knocked against the desk, sending a sheaf of papers cascading to the floor. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, dropping to her knees to gather the scattered documents. James chuckled, joining her on the floor. "No harm done," he assured her, reaching for a paper that had slid beneath the desk. As he stretched, his sleeve rode up, revealing a nasty bruise on his forearm. Sarah's eyes widened at the sight. Before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. "Mr. Blackwood, are you all right? That looks painful." James quickly pulled his sleeve down, his expression darkening for a moment before he forced a smile. "Just a little accident on the tennis court," he said dismissively. "Nothing to worry about." But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The bruise looked suspiciously like a handprint, as if someone had grabbed James's arm with considerable force. As they stood, Sarah found herself face to face with James, close enough to see the faint lines of worry etched around his eyes. In that moment, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Mr. Blackwood," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I overheard something yesterday. Something I think you need to know." James's eyebrows knitted together in confusion. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "I heard your wife, sir. She was in the bathroom, talking to someone on the phone. She was planning something terrible." James's face paled, his hand gripping the edge of the desk for support. "Go on," he said, his voice strained. "She mentioned a sailing trip," Sarah continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "She said you couldn't survive it, that it had to look like an accident." For a long moment, James said nothing, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Sarah's shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I see," he murmured. "And you're certain of what you heard?" Sarah nodded emphatically. "Yes, sir. I wouldn't have said anything if I wasn't absolutely sure." James sank into his chair, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "I knew things weren't good between Emily and me," he said, more to himself than to Sarah. "But this, I never imagined." Sarah stood awkwardly, unsure of what to do next. She'd delivered her warning, but now what? Should she offer comfort, call the police, leave, and pretend this conversation had never happened? Before she could decide, James looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "Thank you," he said softly. "You may very well have saved my life, but I need to ask you to keep this information to yourself for now. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood, I won't say a word." As she turned to leave, James called out to her once more. "What's your name?" "Sarah, sir." "Sarah Thompson." James nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you, Sarah Thompson. I won't forget this." As Sarah exited the suite, her mind was spinning. She'd done it. She'd warned James Blackwood about the plot against his life, but instead of feeling relieved, she felt a growing sense of unease. What would James do with this information? And more importantly, what would Emily do when she discovered her plans had been thwarted? Throughout the rest of her shift, Sarah found herself jumping at every sound, her eyes constantly darting to the elevators, half expecting Emily or some shadowy figure to emerge and confront her. But the day passed without incident, and as Sarah clocked out, she allowed herself to hope that perhaps the worst was behind her. Little did she know that her actions had set in motion a chain of events that would not only shake the foundations of the Blackwood Empire, but would also unearth long-buried secrets from her own past. As Sarah made her way home that evening, the New York City streets teeming with life around her, she was blissfully unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The stage was set, the players in position, and Sarah Thompson, the unassuming hotel cleaner, had unwittingly become the catalyst for a drama that would captivate the city and beyond. The lines between victim and villain, savior and betrayer, were about to blur, and at the center of it all stood Sarah, poised on the precipice of a journey that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her very understanding of who she truly was. As the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, casting long shadows across the city streets, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The weight of her knowledge, of the role she now played in this unfolding drama, pressed down on her, both a burden and a strange sort of exhilaration. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, a player in a game much larger than herself. But with that aliveness came fear, uncertainty, and a gnawing sense that her life would never be the same again. The following morning dawned grey and overcast, mirroring Sarah's tumultuous state of mind. As she made her way to the Grand Lux Hotel, her thoughts were a whirlwind of anxiety and second-guessing. Had she done the right thing by warning James Blackwood? What if Emily somehow discovered that Sarah was the one who had revealed her plans? Sarah's footsteps echoed in the nearly empty lobby as she made her way to the employee locker room. The hotel was eerily quiet at this early hour, the usual bustle of guests and staff not yet begun. As she changed into her uniform, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Her shift began, as it always did, with a list of rooms to clean and restock. But as Sarah pushed her cart down the plush hallways, her eyes constantly darted around, half expecting Emily or one of her associates to appear at any moment. It was just past 10 o'clock when Sarah found herself once again outside the Blackwoods' penthouse suite. Her hand trembled as she raised it to knock, the memory of yesterday's conversation with James still fresh in her mind. "Housekeeping," she called softly, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. To her surprise, the door swung open almost immediately, revealing James Blackwood himself. His face was drawn and pale, dark circles under his eyes, betraying a sleepless night. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I'm glad you're here. Please, come in." Hesitantly, Sarah stepped into the suite, leaving her cleaning cart in the hallway. James closed the door behind her, then turned to face her, his blue eyes intense. I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday," he began, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "At first, I couldn't believe it. Emily and I have had our problems, but murder, it seemed impossible." Sarah nodded, her throat tight with apprehension. "I understand, Mr. Blackwood. I almost couldn't believe it myself when I overheard it." James paced the room, his agitation palpable. But the more I thought about it, the more things started to make sense. The way Emily's been acting lately, her insistence on this sailing trip. And then there's this. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before handing it to Sarah. On the display was a series of text messages, clearly between Emily and someone saved in the contacts as Eli. The messages were vague, but the implications were chilling. Everything's set for Friday. Jay won't know what hit him. Remember, it has to look like an accident. Sarah's hands shook as she handed the phone back to James. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's really true." James nodded grimly. "I confronted Emily about it this morning. She denied everything, of course, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. She stormed out, said she was going to stay with her sister for a few days." Sarah's mind raced. "What are you going to do? Have you called the police?" James shook his head. "Not yet. The messages are damning, but they're not explicit enough to prove anything. And without concrete evidence, it would be my word against Emily's. Do you have any idea how that would look in the press? Billionaire accuses wife of murder plot. It would be a circus." Sarah couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the man before her. Despite his wealth and status, in this moment, he seemed utterly alone and vulnerable. "There's something else," James continued, his voice dropping even lower. "Something I haven't told anyone. I think Emily might not be working alone." Sarah's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" James sank into an armchair, gesturing for Sarah to sit as well. "Over the past few months, I've noticed some discrepancies in the company's finances. Nothing major, but enough to raise suspicions. I started looking into it quietly, and I think someone high up in the organization might be embezzling funds." Sarah leaned forward, her cleaning duties all but forgotten. "And you think this person might be working with Emily?" James nodded. "It's possible. If I were to die in an accident, Emily would inherit everything, including control of the company. It would be the perfect opportunity for anyone involved in financial misconduct to cover their tracks." The weight of this new information settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. She had stumbled into something far bigger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. Part of her wanted to run, to forget everything she'd heard and go back to her simple life of anonymity. But another part, a part she barely recognized, felt a strange excitement at being involved in something so important. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "what can I do to help?" James looked at her thoughtfully, as if seeing her for the first time. "You've already done more than I could have asked, Sarah, but if you're willing, I could use your help. Your position in the hotel gives you access to places and information that I can't get to without arousing suspicion." Sarah nodded slowly, her mind already racing with possibilities. "What do you need me to do?" For the next hour, James outlined his plan. Sarah would continue her normal duties, but keep an eye out for anything suspicious. She would pay special attention to Emily's comings and goings, as well as any visitors she might receive. James gave her a burner phone, instructing her to use it only to contact him with any information she uncovered. As Sarah left the suite, her head spinning with all she had learned, she couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and exhilaration. She had been thrust into a world of wealth, power, and danger, a world she had only ever observed from the sidelines. Now, she was a player in this high-stakes game, and the thought both terrified and thrilled her. The rest of Sarah's shift passed in a blur of nervous energy. Every guest she encountered, every conversation she overheard, took on new significance. Was that well-dressed businessman Emily's mysterious accomplice? Did that hushed phone call in the hallway contain some vital clue? As she clocked out that evening, Sarah's mind was racing with everything that had transpired. She had always prided herself on being invisible, on blending into the background. Now, she felt as if she was standing in a spotlight, every move scrutinized. Walking home through the bustling New York streets, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She found herself glancing over her shoulder, studying the reflections in shop windows for any sign of a tale. The city that had always been her home suddenly felt alien and threatening. Arriving at her modest apartment, Sarah double-checked the locks before collapsing onto her worn sofa. She pulled out the burner phone James had given her, staring at it as if it might suddenly come to life. What had she gotten herself into? As the gravity of her situation settled over her, Sarah's thoughts turned to her late father. What would he think of her involvement in all this? Would he be proud of her for standing up for what was right? Or would he caution her against getting involved in matters far beyond her station? Sarah's fingers traced the outline of the locket she always wore, the only memento she had of her father. Inside was a faded photograph of him, his kind eyes and warm smile frozen in time. She had always felt his absence keenly, but never more so than in this moment. "What should I do, Dad?" she whispered to the empty room. "How do I navigate this world I know nothing about?" As if in answer, a memory surfaced, her father's voice, warm and reassuring. "Always trust your instincts, Sarah. They'll never lead you astray." Taking a deep breath, Sarah made a decision. She would see this through wherever it led. She would be careful, yes, but she wouldn't let fear paralyze her. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, a part of something bigger than herself. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what the coming days would bring. Little did she know that her decision to help James Blackwood would set in motion a chain of events that would not only expose long-buried secrets and shake the foundations of New York's elite, but would also lead her to uncover truths about her own past that she never could have imagined. The stage was set, the players in motion, and at the center of it all was Sarah Thompson, the unassuming hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, poised on the brink of a journey that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her very understanding of who she truly was. The next morning dawned with a sense of anticipation that Sarah couldn't shake. As she made her way to the Grand Lux Hotel, her eyes darted from face to face, searching for any sign of Emily or her mysterious accomplice. The weight of the burner phone in her pocket felt like a constant reminder of the dangerous game she had agreed to play. Sarah's shift began, as it always did, with a list of rooms to clean and restock. But today, every task felt charged with new significance. As she moved through the hotel's opulent corridors, she found herself hyper-aware of her surroundings, cataloguing every detail that might prove important later. It was just past 11 when Sarah's path crossed with Emily's for the first time since overhearing the murderous plot. The redhead emerged from the elevator, her face a mask of cool composure. But as her eyes met Sarah's, there was a flicker of something, recognition, suspicion, that made Sarah's heart race. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood," Sarah managed to say, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. Emily's gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment too long before she nodded curtly and swept past, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. As soon as Emily was out of sight, Sarah ducked into an empty room, her hands shaking as she pulled out the burner phone. She quickly typed out a message to James. Emily just arrived at the hotel, seemed tense, heading towards the penthouse. Sarah had barely slipped the phone back into her pocket when she heard voices approaching. She busied herself with straightening the already immaculate room, straining to catch snippets of the conversation. "Can't believe he cancelled the trip," a man's voice said, low and urgent. "We'll have to move quickly. The window of opportunity is closing." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Could this be Emily's accomplice? She risked a glance through the partially open door, catching sight of a tall man in an expensive suit walking alongside Emily. His face was unfamiliar, but there was something about his bearing that screamed danger. As their voices faded down the hallway, Sarah's mind raced. She needed to get closer, to hear more. But how? An idea struck her, born of years of navigating the hotel unseen. Sarah quickly gathered her cleaning supplies and made her way to the penthouse floor. She positioned her cart near the Blackwood suite, making a show of dusting and polishing the ornate hallway fixtures. From her vantage point, she could just make out the muffled voices coming from inside the suite. Emily's tone was sharp, angry. "He knows something, I'm sure of it. We need to act now, before he has a chance to—" The man's voice cut her off, too low for Sarah to make out the words. But the tension in the air was palpable, even through the closed door. Suddenly, the door swung open. Sarah ducked her head, pretending to be absorbed in her work. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Emily and the man exit the suite. "Remember," Emily hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, "the gala tomorrow night. It's our best chance. Make it look like an accident, just like we planned." Sarah's blood ran cold. They were going to make their move at the charity gala the hotel was hosting the following evening. She had to warn James. As soon as Emily and her companion disappeared into the elevator, Sarah pulled out the burner phone, her fingers flying over the keys. "Emergency. Need to meet ASAP. They're planning something for the gala tomorrow night." James's response came almost immediately. "Meet me in the hotel bar in 20 minutes. Come alone." Sarah's heart pounded as she made her way to the bar, her mind racing with the implications of what she had overheard. As she pushed open the heavy wooden doors, she spotted James immediately, seated in a secluded corner booth. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and urgent as she slid into the seat across from him. "Tell me everything." For the next 15 minutes, Sarah recounted every detail of what she had seen and heard. James listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is worse than I thought," he said when she had finished. "If they're willing to make their move so publicly, they must be desperate or confident." "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James's eyes met hers, and she was struck by the intensity of his gaze. "I'm going to attend that gala," he said firmly. "But I need your help, Sarah. You're the only one I can trust right now." The weight of his words settled over Sarah like a heavy cloak. She was in deep now, far beyond the point of no return. But as she looked at James, saw the mix of determination and vulnerability in his eyes, she knew she couldn't back out now. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. James leaned in closer, his voice dropping even lower. "I need you to be my eyes and ears at the gala. You know this hotel better than anyone. You can move around unnoticed, gather information. Can you do that? Sarah nodded, a strange mix of fear and excitement coursing through her veins. Yes, she said. I can do that. As they finalized their plans, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the turn her life had taken. Just days ago, she had been nothing more than a faceless cleaner, invisible to the wealthy guests she served. Now, she was at the center of a dangerous plot, working alongside one of the most powerful men in New York to uncover a conspiracy that threatened to shake the city's elite to its core. As she left the bar, Sarah's mind was already racing with preparations for the following night. She would need to find a way to blend in at the gala, to move among the guests without arousing suspicion. It would be the performance of a lifetime, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Back in her tiny apartment that evening, Sarah stood before her mirror, studying her reflection. The woman who looked back at her seemed different somehow, stronger, more determined. She fingered the locket around her neck, thinking of her father. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, Dad," she whispered to the empty room. "I hope you'd be proud of me." As she prepared for bed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something monumental. The gala tomorrow night would change everything, for better or for worse. And she, Sarah Thompson, would be at the heart of it all. Little did she know that the events of the following evening would not only expose the truth behind Emily's plot, but would also set in motion a chain of revelations that would shake Sarah's understanding of her own past to its very foundations. The stage was set for a night of high stakes, hidden agendas, and life-altering discoveries. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled with swirling images of glittering ballrooms, shadowy figures, and a sense of impending destiny. Tomorrow night, everything would change, and Sarah Thompson, the unassuming hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, would be at the center of it all, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with newfound courage and determination. The day of the gala arrived with a palpable sense of tension hanging in the air. Sarah woke before dawn, her mind already racing with the myriad details of the plan she and James had concocted. As she dressed in her familiar hotel uniform, she couldn't help but feel like an actress preparing for the most important role of her life. The Grand Lux Hotel was a hive of activity as Sarah arrived for her shift. Staff members scurried about, making last-minute preparations for the evening's event. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces, caterers wheeled in carts laden with gourmet delicacies, and security personnel conducted thorough sweeps of the premises. Sarah moved through her usual cleaning routine with practiced efficiency, all the while keeping her eyes and ears open for any sign of Emily or her mysterious accomplice. The burner phone James had given her felt like a lead weight in her pocket, a constant reminder of the dangerous game she was playing. As the morning wore on, Sarah found herself outside the Blackwoods penthouse suite once again. She hesitated for a moment before knocking, her heart racing. "Housekeeping," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The door swung open to reveal James, looking haggard and tense. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Come in, quickly." Once inside, James closed the door and turned to face her. There's been a change of plans," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I've received some information that suggests Emily and her accomplice might be planning to make their move earlier than we anticipated." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Earlier? But how? When? James shook his head, frustration evident in every line of his face. "I'm not sure, but we need to be prepared for anything. Are you still willing to go through with this?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. She thought of her father, of the values he had instilled in her. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm in, no matter what." Relief flooded James's features. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know how I can ever repay you for this." For the next hour, they went over the revised plan in painstaking detail. Sarah would use her access as a staff member to monitor the preparations for the gala, keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. During the event itself, She would don a disguise provided by James, an elegant evening gown and a carefully crafted wig, allowing her to move among the guests unrecognized. As Sarah left the suite, her mind whirling with all the new information, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and terror. This was so far beyond anything she had ever experienced, yet something deep inside her felt right, as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life without even knowing it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Sarah went about her duties with mechanical precision, all the while observing every detail of the gala preparations with newfound intensity. She noted the placement of every security camera, every exit, every potential hiding spot. As evening approached, Sarah slipped away to a secluded storage room where James had left her disguise. With trembling hands, she transformed herself from the invisible hotel cleaner into a vision of elegance and sophistication. The midnight blue gown hugged her curves in a way that made her almost unrecognizable to herself. The honey blonde wig, styled in an elaborate updo, completed her metamorphosis. Sarah stared at her reflection in a small mirror, barely able to believe the transformation. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she belonged in this world of wealth and privilege. But then she remembered her purpose, her mission, and her resolve hardened. As she made her way to the grand ballroom, Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The room was a glittering spectacle of wealth and opulence. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, their jewelry sparkling like stars in the night sky. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her eyes constantly scanning for any sign of Emily or her accomplice. She spotted James across the room, engaged in conversation with a group of distinguished-looking men. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her an almost imperceptible nod. As she circulated, Sarah overheard snippets of conversation, gossip about mergers and acquisitions, whispers of political scandals, boasts about vacation homes and private jets. It was a world so far removed from her own that it felt almost like a dream. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the din. "James, darling, there you are." Sarah turned to see Emily gliding across the room towards her husband, a vision in emerald green. But there was something in Emily's eyes, a hardness that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. As Emily reached James, Sarah saw her slip something into his hand, a champagne flute. With growing horror, Sarah realized this must be it. Their plan to poison James right here, in front of everyone. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Sarah knew she had to act, but how? She couldn't simply rush across the room and knock the glass from James's hand. That would blow her cover and potentially ruin everything. In that moment, Sarah made a split-second decision. She grabbed a tray of champagne from a passing waiter and made her way towards James and Emily, her heart pounding in her ears. As she approached, she deliberately stumbled, sending the tray of glasses crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass filled the air, and all eyes turned towards the commotion. In the confusion, Sarah managed to bump into James, whispering urgently, "Don't drink it. It's poisoned." James's eyes widened in understanding. Without missing a beat, he turned to Emily with a forced smile. "Darling, it seems I've been clumsy. Why don't we get some fresh glasses?" Emily's face contorted in barely concealed rage, but she had no choice but to play along. "Of course, dear. How careless of you." As James led Emily away, ostensibly to get more champagne, Sarah felt a hand grasp her arm. She turned to find herself face to face with the man she had seen with Emily earlier, her accomplice. "I don't know who you are," he hissed, his grip tightening painfully, "but you're playing a very dangerous game. I suggest you leave now while you still can." Sarah's heart raced, but she met his gaze steadily. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to clean up this mess." She wrenched her arm free and hurried away, her mind reeling. She had managed to thwart their immediate plan, but what would they try next? And how long could she maintain this charade? As she made her way to a quiet corner of the ballroom, Sarah's eyes met James's across the room. He gave her a slight nod, a look of gratitude and determination in his eyes. They had won this round, but the night was far from over. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly alive, truly purposeful. And as she rejoined the glittering crowd, blending in seamlessly with the elite of New York society, she couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than she could have ever imagined. Little did Sarah know that the events of this night would not only expose the truth behind Emily's murderous plot, but would also set in motion a chain of revelations that would shake the very foundations of her world. As the gala continued around her, Sarah Thompson, the unassuming hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, stood on the precipice of discoveries that would change her life forever. The gala continued to swirl around Sarah, a dizzying whirlwind of glitter and champagne. Her heart still raced from the close call with James's poisoned drink, but she forced herself to remain calm and composed. She had a role to play, and now more than ever, she needed to be vigilant. As she circulated through the crowd, Sarah kept a watchful eye on Emily and her mysterious accomplice. The tension between them was palpable, even from across the room. Emily's emerald gown seemed to shimmer with barely contained rage, while her partner's face was a mask of cold calculation. Sarah's mind raced, trying to anticipate their next move. The poisoned champagne had failed, but surely they had a backup plan. She needed to stay close, to overhear any whispered conversations or catch any suspicious movements. As she maneuvered through the throng of New York's elite, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the ease with which she now moved in this world. Just days ago, she had been invisible to these people, nothing more than a nameless face in a hotel uniform. Now, in her elegant gown and carefully crafted disguise, she was one of them, or at least she appeared to be. Suddenly, a hand grasped her elbow, and Sarah turned to find herself face to face with James. His blue eyes were intense, his voice low and urgent as he leaned in close, ostensibly in an intimate gesture. "They're on the move," he murmured, his lips barely moving. Emily just received a text and left the ballroom. Her accomplice followed a minute later. "We need to find out what they're up to." Sarah nodded, almost imperceptibly, her pulse quickening. "I'll follow Emily," she whispered back. "You take the man. Be careful, James." As they parted, Sarah couldn't help but feel a twinge of concern for James. Despite his wealth and power, he seemed vulnerable in this moment, a man fighting for his life against those he should have been able to trust. She pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. With practiced ease, Sarah slipped out of the ballroom, her eyes scanning the ornate hallway for any sign of Emily. A flash of emerald caught her attention, disappearing around a corner at the far end of the corridor. Sarah followed, her heart pounding in her chest. The hotel's labyrinthine hallways were eerily quiet compared to the bustling gala. Sarah's footsteps seemed impossibly loud on the plush carpet as she trailed Emily, always staying just far enough behind to avoid detection. She watched as Emily made her way to the service elevator, quickly stepping inside. Sarah's mind raced. The service elevator led to the hotel's restricted areas, the kitchens, laundry rooms, and staff quarters. What could Emily possibly be doing down there? Without hesitation, Sarah ducked into a nearby supply closet. In a matter of minutes, she had shed her elegant gown, revealing the hotel uniform she had worn underneath as a precaution. She quickly removed her wig, tucking it into a bag along with the dress. Emerging from the closet, Sarah was once again the invisible hotel cleaner. She made her way to the service elevator, her heart racing as she pressed the call button. As the doors slid open, she stepped inside, pressing the button for the basement level where the main kitchen was located. The elevator descended, and Sarah tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had no idea what she would find when those doors opened, but she knew she had to be prepared for anything. As the elevator came to a stop and the doors slid open, Sarah was hit with a wall of sound and activity. The main kitchen was a hive of controlled chaos, with chefs and kitchen staff rushing to prepare the elaborate meals for the gala upstairs. Sarah stepped out, her eyes scanning the bustling space for any sign of Emily. She moved through the kitchen with purpose, as if she belonged there, nodding to the occasional staff member who glanced her way. Suddenly, she caught a glimpse of emerald fabric disappearing through a door at the far end of the kitchen. Sarah's pulse quickened as she recognized the sign on the door, "Wine Cellar." Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, Sarah slipped through the door and found herself at the top of a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The temperature dropped noticeably as she descended, the sounds of the kitchen fading away. At the bottom of the stairs, Sarah paused, straining her ears. She could hear muffled voices coming from deeper within the cellar. Taking a deep breath, she crept forward, moving silently between the towering racks of wine bottles. As she drew closer, the voices became clearer. Sarah recognized Emily's sharp tone, filled with frustration and anger. "Can't believe you botched it," Emily was saying. "Do you have any idea how much is at stake here?" A man's voice responded, low and threatening. "Watch your tone, Emily. Remember, I'm not the only one with something to lose if this goes south." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized she was listening to Emily and her accomplice. She inched closer, desperate to hear more. "We need to move quickly," Emily said, her voice tight with tension. "James is suspicious now. If we don't act tonight, we may not get another chance." "Relax," the man replied, a hint of amusement in his tone. "I've got it all under control. The car is ready, just like we planned. All we need to do is get James alone for a moment," and Sarah's foot slipped on the damp stone floor, sending a wine bottle crashing to the ground. The sound echoed through the cellar like a gunshot. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, Emily's voice rang out, sharp and dangerous. "Who's there? Show yourself." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she heard footsteps approaching. She looked around frantically, searching for a way out or a place to hide, but she was trapped, cornered in the maze-like cellar. Just as she was about to make a desperate run for it, a hand clamped over her mouth, pulling her back into the shadows. Sarah struggled, panic rising in her throat, until a familiar voice whispered in her ear, "Shh, Sarah, it's me, James." Relief flooded through her as James released his hold. They crouched together in the darkness, barely daring to breathe, as Emily and her accomplice searched the cellar. "There's no one here," the man's voice echoed. "Probably just a rat or something. Come on, we need to finalize the details." As their footsteps faded, James turned to Sarah, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "We need to get out of here," he whispered. "And they're planning something big, and we don't have much time." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "I heard them mention a car," she whispered back. "I think they're planning to abduct you." James's face hardened. "We can't let that happen, but we need proof, something concrete to take to the authorities." As they carefully made their way back towards the stairs, Sarah's mind whirled with possibilities. They had overheard part of the plot, but it wasn't enough. They needed hard evidence, something that would expose Emily and her accomplice once and for all. Just as they reached the bottom of the stairs, Sarah froze. A crazy, dangerous idea had just occurred to her. "James," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I think I know how we can get the proof we need, but it's risky, very risky." James looked at her, his blue eyes intense in the dim light of the cellar. "Tell me," he said simply. As Sarah outlined her plan, she could see the mix of admiration and concern in James's face. It was audacious, potentially disastrous, but if it worked— "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" James asked when she had finished. "It's incredibly dangerous. I can't ask you to put yourself at risk like this." Sarah took a deep breath, thinking of how far she had come, of the invisible cleaner who had somehow become entangled in this web of deceit and danger. She thought of her father, of the values he had instilled in her, and she knew with absolute certainty what she had to do. "I'm sure," she said, her voice steady and determined. "We have to stop them, James, whatever it takes." As they ascended the stairs and stepped back into the controlled chaos of the kitchen, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. In just a few short days, her life had changed beyond recognition. She had been thrust into a world of wealth, power, and danger, a world she had only ever observed from the sidelines. But now, as she prepared to put her daring plan into action, Sarah realized that she was no longer just an observer. She was a player in this high-stakes game, and she was determined to see it through to the end. As they made their way back to the glittering ballroom, Sarah caught her reflection in a polished silver tray. The face that looked back at her was transformed, not by the wig or the makeup, but by a newfound strength and determination that shone in her eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers she might face, Sarah Thompson was ready. The invisible cleaner had become the unlikely heroine, and she was about to take center stage in a drama that would shake the foundations of New York's elite society. Little did Sarah know that her audacious plan would not only expose the truth behind Emily's murderous plot, but would also set in motion a chain of events that would uncover long-buried secrets from her own past. As she stepped back into the dazzling world of the gala, Sarah stood on the precipice of discoveries that would change her life forever. The grand ballroom of the Grand Lux Hotel was a sea of glittering gowns and polished tuxedos. As Sarah and James re-entered, their faces masks of composed elegance that belied the tumultuous emotions churning beneath the surface. Sarah's heart raced as she contemplated the audacious plan she had just proposed. It was risky, potentially disastrous, but it was their best chance at exposing Emily's plot once and for all. As they moved through the crowd, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the ease with which she now navigated this world of wealth and privilege. Just days ago, she had been invisible to these people, nothing more than a nameless face in a hotel uniform. Now, she moved among them as an equal, her carefully crafted disguise allowing her to blend seamlessly into their glittering ranks. James leaned in close, his lips barely moving as he whispered, "Are you absolutely certain about this, Sarah? There's still time to back out." Sarah met his gaze, her eyes filled with a determination that surprised even her. "I'm sure, James," she replied softly. "Adeli, we have to end this tonight before Emily and her accomplice can make another move." With a slight nod, James squeezed her hand gently before moving away, seamlessly engaging in conversation with a group of distinguished-looking men. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Her role in this dangerous charade was about to begin. Moving with practiced grace, Sarah made her way towards Emily, who stood near the bar, a flute of champagne clutched tightly in her manicured hand. As she drew closer, Sarah could see the tension in Emily's posture, the barely contained rage simmering just beneath her polished exterior. "Mrs. Blackwood," Sarah said, pitching her voice slightly higher than normal, "I couldn't help but admire your dress." "It's absolutely stunning." Emily turned, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in Sarah's appearance. For a heart-stopping moment, Sarah feared that her disguise had failed, that Emily would see through the carefully applied makeup and expertly styled wig to recognize the hotel cleaner beneath. But then Emily's face softened into a practiced smile, the kind reserved for social niceties at events like these. "Thank you, darling," she replied, her voice dripping with false warmth. "And you are?" "Sophia Carmichael," Sarah lied smoothly, the false name rolling off her tongue with ease. "I'm new to New York, just moved here from London. This is my first time at one of these grand affairs, and I must say it's all quite overwhelming." Emily's eyes lit up with interest, and Sarah knew she had her hooked. The promise of fresh gossip, of a new player in their social circle, was too tempting for Emily to resist. "Well, Sophia," Emily purred, linking her arm through Sarah's, Allow me to give you a proper introduction to New York society. There are simply dozens of people you simply must meet. As Emily led her through the crowd, making introductions and sharing snippets of gossip, Sarah played her part to perfection. She laughed at the right moments, gasped in feigned shock at the juiciest bits of scandal, and all the while, she kept her senses attuned to any hint of Emily's true plans for the evening. It was nearly an hour later when Sarah's patience finally paid off. Emily's phone buzzed, and as she glanced at the screen, Sarah caught a glimpse of a message that made her blood run cold. Car ready, south entrance. In 30 minutes, Emily's demeanor changed instantly, a predatory gleam entering her eyes. "Sophia, darling," she said, her voice honey-sweet, "I'm afraid I must leave you for a moment. There's a small matter I need to attend to." As Emily moved away, Sarah's mind raced. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. She caught James's eye across the room, giving him the slightest of nods. It was time to put their plan into action. With her heart pounding in her chest, Sarah made her way towards the south entrance of the hotel. She moved swiftly but carefully, always aware of the need to maintain her cover. As she approached the ornate doors leading to the hotel's south terrace, she caught sight of a sleek black car idling just beyond, its tinted windows concealing whoever waited inside. Sarah positioned herself near a large potted plant, partially hidden from view, but with a clear line of sight to both the terrace doors and the waiting car. She didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, Emily appeared, her emerald gown shimmering in the low light. She was followed closely by James, who appeared to be swaying slightly, as if intoxicated. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she realized that despite their precautions, Emily had somehow managed to drug James. As Emily led James towards the waiting car, Sarah knew she had to act fast. She pulled out her phone, quickly activating the video recording function as she had discussed with James earlier. Whatever happened next, they would have irrefutable proof of Emily's intentions. "Come along, darling," Emily was saying, her voice sickly sweet as she guided James towards the car. "I think you've had a bit too much to drink. Let's get you home." James mumbled something unintelligible, his steps unsteady. As they reached the car, the rear door swung open, revealing Emily's accomplice, the same man Sarah had seen earlier in the wine cellar. "Hurry up!" the man hissed, his eyes darting nervously around the terrace. "We don't have much time." As Emily and the man began to maneuver James into the car, Sarah knew she had to make her move. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out from her hiding place, her phone held high. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady. Emily and her accomplice froze, their heads whipping around to stare at Sarah in shock and fury. "Who the hell are you?" Emily snarled, her carefully cultivated socialite persona crumbling in an instant. Sarah stood her ground, her phone still recording. "Someone who knows exactly what you're planning, Emily, and someone who has proof of your attempted murder." The man lunged towards Sarah, but she was quicker, dodging behind a large stone planter. "I wouldn't," she warned. "This is being live-streamed as we speak. If anything happens to me, the police will have all the evidence they need." It was a bluff, of course. The video was only being recorded locally on her phone. But Emily and her accomplice didn't know that. For a moment, everything was still. Sarah could hear her own heart pounding in her ears, could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had never felt more alive or more terrified in her entire life. Then, several things happened at once. James, who had been playing up his drugged state, suddenly straightened, his eyes clear and alert. In one swift motion, he grabbed Emily's arm, twisting it behind her back. At the same time, the terrace doors burst open, revealing a team of police officers, led by none other than Detective Michael Rodriguez, James's longtime friend and confidant. "NYPD! Freeze!" Rodriguez shouted, his gun trained on Emily's accomplice. What followed was a flurry of activity. Emily and her accomplice were handcuffed and read their rights. James gave a brief statement to the police, and Sarah found herself being ushered back into the hotel by a concerned-looking officer. As the adrenaline began to wear off, Sarah felt her knees go weak. She sank into a plush armchair in a quiet corner of the lobby, her mind struggling to process everything that had just happened. She had done it. She, Sarah Thompson, the invisible hotel cleaner, had helped bring down a murderous plot and expose the true nature of Emily Blackwood. It seemed impossible, like something out of a movie or a wild dream. Sarah. She looked up to see James standing before her, his face a mix of concern and gratitude. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her chair. Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. When she finally spoke, her words surprised even her. "I've never been better," she said, a small smile tugging at her lips. James chuckled, shaking his head in amazement. "You were incredible out there. I don't know how I can ever thank you." As Sarah looked into James's eyes, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't just the thrill of their success or the lingering effects of adrenaline. It was something deeper, something she wasn't quite ready to name. "You don't have to thank me," she said softly. "I'm just glad we were able to stop them." James opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Detective Rodriguez approached, his face serious. "James, Sarah," he said, nodding to each of them in turn. "I need to speak with you both. There's been a development." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at the detective's tone. She had thought it was over, that they had won, but something in Rodriguez's eyes told her that their night was far from over. As she stood to follow James and the detective to a more private area, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of yet another life-changing revelation. Whatever was coming, she knew with certainty that her world would never be the same again. Little did Sarah know that the events of this night had set in motion a chain of discoveries that would not only reshape her understanding of the Blackwood family, but would also unearth long-buried secrets from her own past. As she braced herself for whatever news Detective Rodriguez was about to deliver, Sarah Thompson, the unassuming hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, stood poised on the brink of uncovering truths that would shake the very foundations of her world. Detective Rodriguez led Sarah and James to a secluded corner of the hotel lobby, away from the prying eyes and ears of the curious onlookers who had gathered in the wake of the evening's dramatic events. The detective's face was grim, his posture tense, as he gestured for them to take a seat on a plush leather sofa. Sarah's heart raced as she sank into the cushions, her mind whirling with possibilities. What could possibly have happened now? Hadn't they just triumphed over Emily and her nefarious plot? The night had already been a roller coaster of emotions and revelations, and Sarah wasn't sure how much more she could take. James seemed to sense her unease, placing a reassuring hand on her arm as they waited for Detective Rodriguez to speak. The warmth of his touch sent a flutter through Sarah's chest, a momentary distraction from the tension that hung heavy in the air. "First of all," Rodriguez began, his voice low and serious, "I want to commend you both for your bravery tonight. What you did was incredibly risky, but it paid off. We have Emily and her accomplice in custody, and the evidence you gathered will be crucial in building our case against them." Sarah nodded, a small sense of pride blooming in her chest despite her apprehension. She, Sarah Thompson, the invisible hotel cleaner, had played a key role in bringing down a murderous plot. It still seemed surreal. "However," Rodriguez continued, his brow furrowing, "during our initial questioning of Emily's accomplice, some unexpected information came to light. Information that, it concerns you, Sarah." Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. Her? What could Emily's accomplice possibly know about her? She was nobody, just a hotel employee who had stumbled into this web of deceit and danger by chance. Wasn't she? What kind of information? Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Rodriguez glanced at James, an unspoken communication passing between them. James nodded slightly, his jaw set in a grim line. "Sarah," the detective said gently, "the man we arrested tonight, Emily's accomplice, he claims to have known your father. Michael Thompson. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Sarah processed this information. Her father, but how? Michael Thompson had been a simple construction worker, a hard-working man who had raised Sarah on his own after her mother's death. He had passed away 5 years ago in a tragic accident on a job site, leaving Sarah alone in the world. That's impossible, Sarah stammered, shaking her head in disbelief. My father was a construction worker. He didn't know anyone in this world. She gestured vaguely, encompassing the opulent hotel and all it represented. James leaned forward, his blue eyes intense as he looked at Sarah. Sarah, there's more. The man. He says that your father wasn't just a construction worker. He claims that Michael Thompson was once part of a very exclusive circle of, well, let's call them problem solvers for the wealthy and powerful. Sarah's mind reeled. Problem solvers? What did that even mean? She thought of her father, his kind eyes, his weathered hands, the way he'd always stressed the importance of honesty and hard work. How could he have been involved in anything like what James was suggesting? I don't understand, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Why are you telling me this now? What does it have to do with Emily's plot against James? Rodriguez sighed heavily, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Because, Sarah, according to Emily's accomplice, your father's death 5 years ago wasn't an accident. He claims it was orchestrated by the very people your father used to work for, people who feared he knew too much and might one day talk. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs, her vision blurring as tears welled up in her eyes. It couldn't be true. Her father, her kind, hard-working, honest father, couldn't have been mixed up in something so dangerous, so corrupt. No, she whispered, shaking her head vehemently. No, you're wrong. This man, whoever he is, he's lying. He must be. James reached out, taking Sarah's trembling hands in his own. Sarah, I know this is a lot to take in, but I need you to listen carefully. The man we arrested tonight, he says he has proof not just of your father's involvement, but of the conspiracy that led to his death. Sarah's mind raced, trying to reconcile this new information with everything she thought she knew about her father. Memories flooded back, hushed phone calls late at night, mysterious envelopes that would appear and disappear from their small apartment, the way her father would sometimes look over his shoulder when they were out in public, as if expecting to see someone following them. At the time, she had dismissed these oddities as products of her overactive imagination. But now, what kind of proof? Sarah asked, her voice stronger now, fueled by a desperate need to understand. Rodriguez and James exchanged another glance before the detective spoke. Documents, mostly. Financial records, correspondence, and a video. A video that apparently shows the moments leading up to your father's death. Sarah felt as if she might be sick. A video of her father's final moments. The thought was both horrifying and strangely compelling. If there was even a chance that her father's death wasn't the accident she'd always believed it to be, didn't she owe it to his memory to uncover the truth? I want to see it, Sarah said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. The video, the documents, all of it. If this man is telling the truth, if my father was really involved in whatever this is, I need to know. James squeezed her hands gently. Are you sure, Sarah? This could change everything. Once you see what's on that video, there's no going back. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. She thought of her father, of his warm smile, of the way he'd always encouraged her to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. She thought of the past few days, of how she'd discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. I'm sure, she said, meeting James's gaze with determination. Dear, whatever the truth is, I need to face it. I owe it to my father and to myself. Rodriguez nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. All right, the evidence is being processed at the precinct as we speak. I can arrange for you to view it first thing in the morning. As the detective stood to leave, promising to return with more information soon, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. The night's events had been a whirlwind of danger and revelation, pushing her far beyond the boundaries of her once ordinary life. But now, on the cusp of uncovering the truth about her father's past, Sarah realized that her journey was far from over. She turned to James, who was watching her with a mix of concern and admiration. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through tonight without you." James smiled, a warmth in his eyes that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. "You're stronger than you know, Sarah Thompson. Whatever we discover tomorrow, whatever truths come to light, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. I'll be right there beside you, every step of the way." As they sat there in the quiet corner of the hotel lobby, the sounds of the city muffled by the thick walls, Sarah felt a curious mix of emotions wash over her. Fear of what the morning might bring, grief for the father she thought she knew, determination to uncover the truth no matter the cost, and beneath it all, a flicker of something new and unexpected, a warmth that bloomed in her chest whenever she looked at James. Little did Sarah know that the revelations awaiting her in the morning would not only reshape her understanding of her father's life and death, but would also set her on a path that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her past, and her place in the world. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the New York skyline, Sarah Thompson, the unassuming hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, stood poised on the brink of a journey that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her very understanding of the truth. The stage was set for a day of shocking discoveries, unexpected alliances, and dangers that would push Sarah to her limits. But as she sat there, drawing strength from James's presence beside her, Sarah knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, for her father's memory, for the truth, and for the woman she was becoming. A woman who was no longer content to remain invisible, but who was ready to step into the light and claim her own story. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling streets of New York as Sarah and James made their way to the police precinct. The city was already alive with the usual cacophony of honking horns, chattering pedestrians, and the distant wail of sirens. But to Sarah, it all seemed muffled, as if she were moving through a dream. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, anticipation, fear, and a burning curiosity that threatened to consume her. In just a few short hours, she would be face to face with evidence that could potentially rewrite everything she thought she knew about her father and her own history. As they approached the imposing brick facade of the precinct, Sarah felt James's hand on the small of her back, a gesture of silent support that sent a warmth coursing through her. She glanced up at him, struck once again by the intensity of his blue eyes and the determined set of his jaw. How had her life become so intertwined with this man's in such a short time? "Are you ready for this?" James asked softly as they paused at the bottom of the precinct steps. Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. They made their way inside, the fluorescent lights and bustling activity a stark contrast to the opulence of the Grand Lux Hotel, where their adventure had begun. Detective Rodriguez was waiting for them in the lobby, his face etched with lines of concern and fatigue that spoke of a long, sleepless night. "Sarah, James," he greeted them with a nod. "Follow me. We've set up everything in a private viewing room." As they wound their way through the maze of desks and offices, Sarah couldn't help but notice the curious glances thrown their way. She wondered what the officers saw when they looked at her. Did they see the hotel cleaner she had been just days ago, or did they sense the transformation she had undergone? Rodriguez led them into a small, windowless room dominated by a large screen on one wall. A table in the center held a laptop and several thick folders stamped with "confidential" in bold red letters. "And before we begin," Rodriguez said, his tone grave, "I want to make sure you understand what you're about to see. This information, it's sensitive, potentially dangerous. Once you know it, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed?" Sarah met the detective's gaze, her resolve solidifying. "I need to know the truth about my father," she said firmly. "Whatever it is, I can handle it." Rodriguez nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. He moved to the laptop, tapping a few keys before stepping back. "We'll start with the video," he said softly. It's not easy to watch, Sarah, but it may provide some answers." As the screen flickered to life, Sarah felt James's hand slip into hers, a lifeline in the storm she was about to weather. She squeezed it gratefully, drawing strength from his presence as the grainy footage began to play. The video showed a construction site, the camera angle suggesting it was from a security feed. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized her father, Michael Thompson, moving purposefully across the frame. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow him. Suddenly, two men in dark suits appeared, cornering Michael against a stack of steel beams. There was no audio, but Sarah could see the tension in her father's posture, the fear in his eyes as he faced his assailants. Words were exchanged, Michael's hands moving in placating gestures. Then, without warning, one of the men lashed out, striking Michael across the face. The other moved swiftly, producing something from his pocket, a syringe. Sarah's grip on James's hand tightened as she watched her father struggle, fighting against the men as they forced the needle into his arm. Within moments, Michael's movements became sluggish, uncoordinated. He stumbled, his eyes wide with terror and confusion. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The two men stepped back, watching impassively as Michael, clearly disoriented, staggered towards the edge of an unfinished floor. Sarah wanted to scream, to reach through the screen and pull her father back from the brink, but she could only watch, horror-struck, as Michael Thompson took one more unsteady step and plummeted out of frame. The video cut out abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Sarah realized she was trembling, tears streaming down her face. James's arm was around her shoulders, holding her steady as the full impact of what she had just witnessed washed over her. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. They murdered him. They made it look like an accident, but they murdered my father." Rodriguez cleared his throat, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Sarah, but it confirms what our suspect told us. Your father's death was no accident. It was a calculated hit, carried out by professionals." Sarah's mind reeled, trying to reconcile the loving, hard-working father she had known with the man in the video, a man clearly involved in something dangerous enough to cost him his life. "But why?" she asked, her voice small and lost. "Why would anyone want to kill my father?" James spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. "That's what we need to find out, Sarah. And I think the answers might be in those files." He nodded towards the folders on the table. With hands that shook slightly, Sarah reached for the topmost folder. As she opened it, a cascade of documents spilled out. Financial records, correspondence, and surveillance photos. Her eyes widened as she began to read, each page revealing a side of her father she had never known existed. Michael Thompson, it seemed, had indeed been part of a secretive organization that catered to the needs of the wealthy and powerful. But unlike many of his colleagues, Michael had been driven by a desire to right wrongs and expose corruption. The documents painted a picture of a man who had used his position to gather evidence of illegal activities, tax evasion, and even more sinister crimes committed by some of New York's most influential figures. He was going to expose them, Sarah breathed, looking up at James and Rodriguez with dawning understanding. That's why they killed him. He was going to blow the whistle on all of it. Rodriguez nodded grimly. It looks that way. Your father was sitting on a powder keg of information that could have brought down some very powerful people. They couldn't risk letting him talk. As Sarah continued to sift through the documents, a new emotion began to well up inside her: pride. Her father had been more than just a construction worker or even a problem solver for the elite. He had been a hero, working in secret to expose corruption and bring justice to those who thought themselves above the law. But with that pride came a chilling realization. If these people were willing to kill my father to keep their secrets, Sarah said slowly, what does that mean for us now that we know the truth? The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. James was the first to speak, his voice filled with determination. It means we finish what your father started, Sarah. We use this information to expose these people and bring them to justice. It's what Michael would have wanted. Sarah looked at James, seeing the fire in his eyes, the unwavering resolve. She thought of her father, of the risks he had taken to do what was right. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. You're right, she said, straightening her shoulders and meeting James's gaze with equal determination. We owe it to my father to see this through. Whatever it takes, whatever the risks, we need to finish what he started. As Sarah, James, and Detective Rodriguez began to formulate a plan, the energy in the small room crackled with purpose. They were no longer just three individuals brought together by chance and circumstance. They were now a team, united in their quest for justice and truth. Little did they know that their decision would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the foundations of New York's power structures, expose long-buried secrets, and test the limits of their courage and loyalty. As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its light on a city teeming with hidden agendas and shadowy alliances, Sarah Thompson, the once invisible hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, stood poised on the brink of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, her father, and the world she lived in. The stage was set for a tale of danger, revelation, and redemption. And at its heart stood Sarah, ready to step out of the shadows and into a role she never could have imagined, the role of her father's daughter, carrying on his legacy and fighting for the truth, no matter the cost. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as Sarah, James, and Detective Rodriguez delved deeper into the web of corruption that Michael Thompson had uncovered. They pored over documents, cross-referenced financial records, and pieced together a complex puzzle that implicated some of New York's most powerful figures in a range of illegal activities. Sarah found herself in a state of constant amazement, not just at the scope of her father's investigations, but at her own ability to understand and contribute to the process. Years of observing the inner workings of the Grand Lux Hotel had honed her skills of perception and deduction, allowing her to spot patterns and connections that others might have missed. On the fourth day of their investigation, Sarah sat in James's penthouse suite, surrounded by stacks of papers and multiple laptops displaying various financial records. The room, once a symbol of the wealth and privilege that had seemed so far removed from her world, now felt like a war room where they were planning their attack on the corrupt elite. I think I've found something, Sarah said, her voice tinged with excitement as she beckoned James and Rodriguez over to her laptop. Look at these transactions. They're all routed through a series of shell companies, but if you follow the money, it all leads back to one place. James leaned in, his brow furrowed in concentration. Blackstone Enterprises, he murmured, his eyes widening in recognition. That's Victor Blackstone's company. He's one of the most influential real estate developers in the city. Rodriguez nodded grimly. And he's been on our radar for years, but we've never been able to pin anything concrete on him. He's too well connected, too careful. Sarah felt a surge of determination. Well, it looks like my father found what you've been looking for. These records show a pattern of bribery, money laundering, and what looks like a massive tax evasion scheme. As they dug deeper into the Blackstone connection, a clearer picture began to emerge. Victor Blackstone wasn't just a corrupt businessman. He was at the center of a vast network of illegal activities that touched every level of New York's power structure. Politicians, judges, even high-ranking police officials, all were implicated in Blackstone's web of corruption. This is bigger than we imagined, James said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of his agitation. If we're going to take down Blackstone and his network, we need to be extremely careful. These people won't hesitate to eliminate anyone they see as a threat. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she remembered the video of her father's murder. They've already shown how far they're willing to go, she said softly. But we can't let that stop us. We owe it to my father and to all the other victims of their corruption to see this through. Rodriguez nodded, his face set in grim determination. We'll need to build an airtight case before we make any moves, and we'll need to be prepared for the backlash. Once we start pulling on this thread, there's no telling how many powerful people will come after us. As they discussed their next steps, Sarah found her gaze drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows of James's penthouse. The New York skyline stretched out before her, a glittering tapestry of lights that seemed to pulse with hidden secrets. Somewhere out there, Victor Blackstone and his cohorts were going about their lives, confident in their power and impunity. The thought filled Sarah with a fierce determination. We need to infiltrate Blackstone's inner circle, she said suddenly, turning back to James and Rodriguez. All the financial records in the world won't be enough if we can't prove that Blackstone is personally involved in these crimes. James looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern. What are you suggesting, Sarah? Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to propose. I think I should go undercover. Use my skills from the hotel to get a position in Blackstone's organization. I could be his new personal assistant or work in his home, somewhere that would give me access to information we can't get from the outside. The room fell silent as James and Rodriguez absorbed her words. Sarah could see the conflict playing out on their faces, the recognition of the potential value of her plan warring with concern for her safety. It gets too dangerous, James said finally, his voice tight with worry. These people killed your father, Sarah. If they discovered who you really are... I know the risks, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady and determined. But I also know that I'm the best person for this job. I've spent years being invisible, observing without being noticed. And now, thanks to everything we've uncovered, I understand this world in a way I never did before. I can do this, James. I need to do this. Rodriguez cleared his throat, his expression thoughtful. She has a point, James. An inside source could be the key to bringing down Blackstone's entire operation. And Sarah has proven herself more than capable over the past few days. James paced the room, clearly torn. Sarah watched him, her heart racing with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She knew she was volunteering for something incredibly dangerous, but she also felt, deep in her bones, that this was what she was meant to do. This was how she could honor her father's memory and make a real difference in the world. Finally, James turned to face her, his blue eyes intense with emotion. If we do this, and I stress if, we need to take every possible precaution. You'll need extensive training, a foolproof cover story, and constant backup. I won't let you walk into that lion's den without every protection we can provide. Sarah felt a rush of warmth at James's concern, mixed with a steely resolve. I understand, and I'm ready for whatever training you think I need. We can do this, James. Together, we can bring these people to justice. As the three of them began to hash out the details of Sarah's undercover mission, the energy in the room shifted. There was a sense of purpose, of righteous determination that seemed to charge the very air around them. They were no longer just three individuals brought together by circumstance. They were a team, united in their quest to expose corruption and bring down a criminal empire. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah underwent an intense crash course in undercover work. She learned the art of creating and maintaining a false identity, studied the intricacies of Blackstone's business empire, and honed her already considerable skills of observation and deduction. James spared no expense in creating Sarah's new persona. She became Olivia Wells, a highly recommended executive assistant with an impeccable resume and glowing references from some of New York's most prestigious firms. Her wardrobe was upgraded from hotel uniforms to designer suits and accessories that would allow her to blend seamlessly into Blackstone's world of wealth and privilege. As the day of her interview with Blackstone Enterprises approached, Sarah found herself standing before the mirror in her small apartment, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. Gone was the invisible hotel cleaner, replaced by a polished, confident professional ready to take on the corporate world. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection, touching the locket that still hung around her neck, her last tangible connection to her father and her old life. "For Dad, for justice, for all the people these criminals have hurt, you can do this." A soft knock at the door jolted Sarah from her reverie. She opened it to find James standing there, his face a mask of concern and admiration. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Sarah nodded, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." As they made their way to the sleek black car waiting outside, Sarah felt a curious mix of emotions swirling within her. Fear, certainly. She was about to walk into the lair of the very people who had ordered her father's murder. But there was also excitement, a sense of purpose that filled her with a strength she had never known she possessed. As the car pulled away from the curb, Sarah gazed out at the New York streets, seeing them with new eyes. The city that had once seemed so vast and indifferent now felt like a battlefield, and she was a soldier stepping into the fray. Little did Sarah know that her undercover mission would not only test her newfound skills and determination, but would also lead her to uncover secrets that would shake her understanding of her own past and the very foundations of the city she called home. As the Blackstone Enterprises building loomed before them, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun, Sarah Thompson, once an invisible cleaner, now a key player in a dangerous game of cat and mouse, prepared to step into a world of power, corruption, and hidden agendas, armed with nothing but her wits, her training, and her unwavering resolve to see justice done. The stage was set for a high-stakes drama of deception, danger, and unexpected alliances. And at its heart stood Sarah, ready to risk everything in her quest for truth and justice, unaware of the shocking revelations and life-altering discoveries that awaited her in the labyrinth of corruption she was about to enter. The gleaming glass and steel facade of Blackstone Enterprises loomed before Sarah as she stepped out of the car, her heart pounding beneath the crisp white blouse and tailored blazer of her new persona. She took a deep breath, channeling all of her training and newfound confidence into the role of Olivia Wells, ambitious executive assistant. "Remember," James said softly, his hand on her arm, "we're right here with you. The moment anything feels off, you give us the signal, and we'll extract you immediately." Sarah nodded, grateful for his concern, but determined to see this through. "I've got this," she assured him, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Olivia Wells is ready to take on Blackstone Enterprises." As she walked through the revolving doors into the opulent lobby, Sarah marveled at how different this felt from her days at the Grand Lux Hotel. There, she had been invisible, a part of the background. Here, as Olivia, she commanded attention. The click of her heels on the polished marble floor seemed to announce her presence, and she felt the curious glances of employees and visitors alike. At the reception desk, she was greeted by a sleek professional woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes. "Ms. Wells, Mr. Blackstone is expecting you. Please, follow me." As they ascended in the elevator, Sarah's mind raced through the details of her cover story one last time. Olivia Wells, 28 years old, graduate of Columbia University, with a stellar track record as an executive assistant to some of New York's most demanding CEOs. She was efficient, discreet, and above all, loyal to her employers. The elevator doors opened onto the 50th floor, revealing a reception area that exuded power and wealth. Sarah followed her guide down a hallway lined with expensive artwork, her senses on high alert, cataloging every detail. They stopped before an imposing set of double doors. The receptionist knocked softly, then opened one door, gesturing for Sarah to enter. Mr. Blackstone, Mrs. Wells is here for her interview. Sarah stepped into the office, her eyes immediately drawn to the man behind the massive desk. Victor Blackstone was in his early 60s, with silver hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through her. He exuded an aura of authority that made the spacious office feel suddenly smaller. "Ah, Miss Wells," Blackstone said, rising to greet her. His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of a Boston accent. "I've heard impressive things about you. Please, have a seat." As Sarah sat across from Blackstone, she felt a chill run down her spine. This was the man responsible for her father's death, the mastermind behind a web of corruption that stretched across the city. Yet here he was, smiling at her as if he were just another CEO looking for a capable assistant. The interview began, and Sarah found herself slipping effortlessly into the role of Olivia. She answered Blackstone's questions with confidence, drawing on her years of observing the elite guests at the Grand Lux to mirror their mannerisms and speech patterns. "Your resume is certainly impressive, Ms. Wells," Blackstone said, leaning back in his chair. "But tell me, what makes you think you're cut out for this particular position?" Blackstone Enterprises operates in a unique environment. Discretion and loyalty are paramount. Sarah met his gaze steadily, channeling all of her determination into her response. "Mr. Blackstone, in my experience, true loyalty comes from mutual respect and shared goals. I'm not just looking for a job. I'm looking for a cause to believe in, a vision to help bring to life. From everything I've read about Blackstone Enterprises, I believe this could be that place." A flicker of something, approval, interest, passed across Blackstone's face. "Well said, Ms. Wells, but pretty words are easy. How do I know I can trust you with the sensitive information that crosses my desk every day?" Sarah leaned forward slightly, her voice low and intense. "Mr. Blackstone, in my previous positions, I've been privy to information that could have destroyed careers, even lives, but I understand that my role is to facilitate, not to judge. What happens in this office stays in this office. Period." For a long moment, Blackstone studied her, his green eyes unreadable. Then suddenly, he smiled. It was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but it transformed his face nonetheless. "I think you'll fit in well here, Ms. Wells. The job is yours, if you want it. You can start on Monday." Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline course through her. She had done it. She was in. "Thank you, Mr. Blackstone," she said, infusing her voice with genuine enthusiasm. "I won't let you down." As she left the office, her mind was already racing with the implications of her success. She had gained entry into the inner sanctum of one of New York's most powerful and corrupt figures. Now the real work would begin. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Sarah settled into her role as Olivia Wells, executive assistant to Victor Blackstone. She quickly proved her worth, anticipating Blackstone's needs and streamlining his day-to-day operations with an efficiency that impressed even the most skeptical members of his team. But beneath her polished exterior, Sarah was constantly on high alert, watching and listening for any information that could help bring down Blackstone's criminal empire. She catalogued every meeting, every phone call, every document that crossed her desk, feeding the information back to James and Detective Rodriguez through a series of dead drops and encrypted messages. It was exhausting work, maintaining her cover while constantly searching for evidence. But Sarah found that she thrived on the challenge. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive, like she was making a real difference in the world. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah began to notice subtle changes in the way Blackstone treated her. He seemed to be testing her, giving her access to increasingly sensitive information, watching closely to see how she would handle it. One evening, as she was preparing to leave for the day, Blackstone called her into his office. "Olivia," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat, "I have a special assignment for you, one that requires the utmost discretion." Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone, what can I do for you?" Blackstone slid a file across the desk to her. "I need you to personally deliver this to Judge Harrington at his home tonight. No one else can know about this. Understand? This information doesn't leave this room." Sarah nodded, taking the file. "Understood, sir. I'll take care of it right away." As she left the office, her mind was spinning. Judge Harrington was a name that had come up repeatedly in her father's files, a key player in Blackstone's network of corruption. Whatever was in this file, it had to be important. That night, as she made her way to the judge's upscale brownstone, Sarah's nerves were on edge. This could be the break they had been waiting for, but it was also incredibly dangerous. If she were caught, she pushed the thought aside as she rang the doorbell. Judge Harrington himself answered, a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown. "Miss Wells, I presume?" he said, his voice gruff. "Come in, quickly." As Sarah followed him into his study, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap, but she had come too far to turn back now. The judge took the file from her, flipping it open on his desk. As he read, his frown deepened. "This is troubling," he muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. "Blackstone is pushing too hard. If this gets out—" Sarah's ears pricked up at his words. Whatever was in that file, it was clearly incriminating. She needed to find a way to get a look at its contents. Suddenly, the judge looked up at her, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "Why did Blackstone send you with this? You're new, aren't you? How do I know I can trust you?" Sarah felt her heart skip a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Mr. Blackstone values my discretion above all else, Your Honor," she said smoothly. "He knows that I understand the importance of loyalty and confidentiality." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Very well. You can tell Blackstone that I'll take care of it, but warn him, this is the last time. I won't put my neck on the line for him again." As Sarah left the brownstone, her mind was racing. She had just witnessed a clear exchange of corrupt information between two of the most powerful men in the city. It wasn't hard evidence, but it was a start. Back in her small apartment, Sarah carefully documented everything she had seen and heard that night, encrypting the information before sending it to James and Rodriguez. As she finished, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. She was making progress, getting closer to the truth, but at what cost? Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the glittering New York skyline. Somewhere out there, her father had walked these same streets, fought this same fight. She touched the locket around her neck, drawing strength from the memory of his courage. "I'm doing this for you, Dad," she whispered. "And for everyone else these people have hurt. I won't let them win, no matter what it takes." Little did Sarah know that her delivery to Judge Harrington had set in motion a chain of events that would soon spiral beyond her control. As she gazed out at the city, unaware of the storm gathering on the horizon, Sarah Thompson, the hotel cleaner turned undercover agent, stood on the precipice of discoveries that would shake her world to its very foundations and test her courage and resolve in ways she could never have imagined. The following weeks saw Sarah delving deeper into the intricate web of corruption that surrounded Victor Blackstone and his associates. Her role as Olivia Wells, the efficient and discreet executive assistant, had become second nature to her, allowing her to move seamlessly through the upper echelons of New York's business and political elite. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah arrived at the Blackstone Enterprises offices to find an unusual level of tension in the air. As she made her way to her desk, she noticed hushed conversations and worried glances being exchanged among the staff. Her instincts, honed by months of undercover work, told her that something significant was happening. No sooner had she settled at her desk than Victor Blackstone's voice came through the intercom. "Olivia, my office, now." Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever was to come. She smoothed her blazer, a habit she had developed to center herself before entering potentially dangerous situations, and made her way to Blackstone's office. As she entered, she immediately sensed the tension radiating from Blackstone. He was pacing behind his desk, his usually composed demeanor replaced by barely contained agitation. "Close the door," he barked, not even looking up as Sarah entered. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackstone?" Sarah asked, careful to keep her tone neutral and professional. Blackstone finally stopped pacing and fixed her with an intense stare. "Olivia, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, her heart racing. "Of course, sir. You can count on my discretion." Blackstone sank into his chair, running a hand through his silver hair. "There's been a leak. Someone within our organization has been feeding information to the feds. We're not sure how much they know, but it's enough to pose a serious threat to our operations." Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral, even as her mind raced. A leak? Could it be that her efforts, combined with the evidence her father had gathered, were finally bearing fruit? "That's terrible, sir," she said, infusing her voice with just the right amount of concern and loyalty. "What can I do to help?" Blackstone's green eyes studied her face intently, as if searching for any sign of deception. "I need you to go through every communication, every file, every scrap of paper that's left this office in the past 6 months. Find out who's been talking and to whom. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded firmly. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone. I'll start right away. You can count on me to get to the bottom of this." As she left Blackstone's office, Sarah's mind was whirling with the implications of this new development. On one hand, it was encouraging to know that their efforts were having an effect. On the other, this heightened scrutiny could put her in grave danger if she wasn't careful. Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into the task Blackstone had given her, all while carefully feeding select pieces of information back to James and Detective Rodriguez. She worked late into the night, ostensibly searching for the leak, but in reality using this opportunity to gather even more evidence of Blackstone's illegal activities. It was on the 4th night of her investigation that Sarah stumbled upon something that made her blood run cold. Hidden deep in a file of seemingly innocuous financial records was a series of transactions that caught her eye. As she dug deeper, she realized she was looking at evidence of a massive money laundering operation, one that dwarfed anything they had uncovered so far. But it wasn't just the scale of the operation that shocked her. Among the names listed as beneficiaries of these illegal funds, Sarah saw one that made her heart stop. Thompson M. With trembling hands, Sarah dug further into the file, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were telling her. But there it was, in black and white, evidence that her father, Michael Thompson, had been receiving regular payments from Blackstone's organization for years before his death. Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. How could this be possible? Her father, the man she had idolized, the crusader for justice whose mission she had taken up, had he been on Blackstone's payroll all along? She sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. Everything she thought she knew, everything she had been fighting for, suddenly seemed to be built on a lie. Was it possible that her father's death hadn't been a murder, but some kind of falling out among thieves? As the shock began to wear off, Sarah's training kicked in. She couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment. There had to be an explanation, something she was missing. She needed to get this information to James and Rodriguez as soon as possible. With shaking hands, she began to copy the relevant files, her mind working furiously to process this new information. Whatever the truth was, she was determined to uncover it. Just as she was finishing, a noise in the outer office made her freeze. Footsteps were approaching Blackstone's office. Sarah quickly shut down the computer and gathered the copied files, slipping them into a hidden pocket in her blazer. The door opened, and Sarah found herself face to face with Victor Blackstone himself. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Sarah, alone in his office late at night, clearly startled by his arrival. "Olivia," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Sarah's mind raced, but her voice remained steady as she replied, "Mr. Blackstone, I was just finishing up my investigation into the leak. I think I may have found something significant." Blackstone's eyes bore into hers, searching for any sign of deception. "Is that so? And what? Pray tell, have you discovered?" Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words could mean the difference between life and death. She had to give him something that would explain her presence without revealing what she had really uncovered. "I've traced a series of unusual communications between one of our junior executives and a known FBI informant," she said, thinking quickly. "It's not conclusive, but it's certainly suspicious. I was just about to compile a report for you." For a long moment, Blackstone said nothing, his green eyes never leaving Sarah's face. Then slowly, a smile spread across his features. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "Excellent work, Olivia," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I knew I could count on you. Why don't you go home and get some rest? We can discuss your findings in detail tomorrow." Sarah nodded, careful to keep her relief from showing on her face. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone. I'll have the full report on your desk first thing in the morning." As she gathered her things and made her way out of the office, Sarah could feel Blackstone's eyes on her back. She forced herself to move naturally, to not betray the fear and confusion roiling inside her. Once she was in the elevator, alone, Sarah let out a shaky breath. She had come so close to being caught. And now, with this new information about her father, she felt more alone and uncertain than ever. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Sarah's mind was racing. She needed to get the information she had discovered to James and Rodriguez as soon as possible. But more than that, she needed answers. Who was Michael Thompson, really? What was his true relationship with Blackstone? And most importantly, who could she trust now? Sarah hailed a taxi, giving the driver an address several blocks from her actual apartment. As the city lights blurred past the window, she touched the locket around her neck, the one tangible connection she had left to her father. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What have you gotten me into?" Little did Sarah know that her discovery was just the tip of the iceberg. As she made her way home, clutching the stolen files close to her chest, forces were already in motion that would soon turn her world upside down. The truth about Michael Thompson and his connection to Blackstone was far more complex and dangerous than Sarah could have imagined, and uncovering it would test her courage, her loyalty, and her very understanding of right and wrong. The stage was set for a series of revelations that would shake the foundations of everything Sarah thought she knew. As she prepared to confront James and Rodriguez with her discovery, Sarah Thompson, the hotel cleaner turned undercover agent, stood on the precipice of a truth that would change her life forever, unaware of the storm that was about to break over her head. The New York City night was alive with its usual cacophony of sounds as Sarah made her way to the predetermined meeting spot. Her heart raced, not just from the brisk pace she maintained, but from the weight of the information she carried. The evidence of her father's possible involvement with Blackstone's organization felt like a lead weight in her pocket, threatening to drag her down into depths of doubt and confusion she had never before experienced. As she approached the nondescript coffee shop that served as their secure meeting location, Sarah's trained eyes scanned the area for any sign of surveillance or danger. Satisfied that she hadn't been followed, she pushed open the door, the little bell above it announcing her arrival with a cheerful jingle that felt oddly out of place given the gravity of the situation. James and Detective Rodriguez were already there, seated in a corner booth far from the windows. Their faces, etched with concern, told Sarah that they sensed the urgency of this unscheduled meeting. "Sarah," James said softly as she slid into the booth beside him. "What's happened? Are you all right?" She nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "I'm fine, but I've found something that changes everything." With trembling hands, Sarah pulled out the copied files and spread them on the table, her voice barely above a whisper as she explained what she had discovered. As she spoke, she watched the expressions on James and Rodriguez's faces shift from concern to shock, and then to something she couldn't quite read. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over the booth. It was Rodriguez who finally broke it, his voice gruff with emotion. "Sarah, I don't know what to say. This is unexpected, to say the least." James leaned forward, his blue eyes intense as he studied the documents. "We need to be careful here," he said slowly. "This information, if it's accurate, could change the entire scope of our investigation, but we can't jump to conclusions. There could be an explanation we're not seeing." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for James's measured response. Part of her had feared that they would immediately condemn her father, or worse, suspect her of some kind of complicity. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Rodriguez rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We need to dig deeper. These transactions, they could be evidence of your father's involvement in Blackstone's operation, or they could be something else entirely. We need more context, more information." James nodded in agreement. "Sarah, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, but we need you to keep your cover intact. If Blackstone suspects anything, especially now that he knows there's a leak, you could be in serious danger." Sarah took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I understand. I can do this. I need to know the truth, whatever it might be." As they discussed their next steps, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions churning inside her. The idea that her father might have been involved in the very corruption she was fighting against was almost too much to bear. But at the same time, a small part of her clung to hope that there was more to this story, that her father was still the hero she had always believed him to be. The meeting concluded with a renewed sense of purpose, albeit tinged with uncertainty. As Sarah prepared to leave, James caught her arm gently. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and intense, "whatever we uncover, whatever the truth turns out to be, I want you to know that I'm here for you. We're in this together." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her at his words, a lifeline in the storm of confusion and doubt that threatened to overwhelm her. She managed a small smile, squeezing his hand gratefully before slipping out into the night. The next few weeks were a blur of activity as Sarah threw herself into her role at Blackstone Enterprises with renewed vigor. She was determined to uncover the truth about her father's involvement, all while maintaining her cover and continuing to gather evidence against Blackstone and his network. It was a delicate balancing act, one that required all of Sarah's newfound skills and determination. By day, she was the ever-efficient Olivia Wells, earning more and more of Blackstone's trust. By night, she pored over documents, cross-referencing dates and names, searching for any clue that might shed light on her father's true role in this complex web of corruption. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself drawn deeper into Blackstone's inner circle. He began inviting her to high-level meetings, introducing her to powerful figures in business and politics. With each interaction, Sarah gathered more evidence of the vast network of corruption that Blackstone controlled, but she also found herself increasingly conflicted. The Victor Blackstone she saw in these private moments was not the one-dimensional villain she had imagined. He could be charming, even kind at times. She saw glimpses of a man who genuinely believed he was doing what was necessary for the greater good, even if his methods were questionable at best and criminal at worst. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave the office, Blackstone called her into his private study. It was a room she had only been in once before, a sanctuary filled with rare books and priceless art. As she entered, she found Blackstone standing by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, gazing out at the glittering New York skyline. "Olivia," he said, not turning around, "do you believe in fate?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "I'm not sure, sir," she replied cautiously. "Why do you ask?" Blackstone turned to face her, his green eyes piercing in the soft lamplight. "I've been thinking about the paths that lead us to where we are. The choices we make, the people we meet, it's all connected, isn't it?" Sarah's heart raced as she tried to decipher the meaning behind his words. Was this some kind of test? "I suppose it is, Mr. Blackstone," she said carefully. He nodded, taking a sip of his scotch before continuing. "You remind me of someone I knew once, a man of great integrity and vision. He understood, as few do, the necessity of sometimes working outside the law to achieve a greater good." Sarah felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Could he be talking about her father? She forced herself to remain calm, to keep her expression neutral as Blackstone continued. "This man and I, we had our differences. In the end, those differences cost him everything. But I've often wondered what might have been if things had gone differently." Blackstone moved to his desk, pulling out a file from a drawer. "I'm entrusting you with something very important, Olivia. This file contains information that could destroy everything I've built, but it also holds the key to understanding why I do what I do. I want you to study it, to understand it. Can I trust you with this?" Sarah's mind was reeling, but she managed to nod. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone, you can count on my discretion." As she took the file, her hands trembling slightly, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of a monumental discovery. Whatever was in this file, she sensed it would change everything, not just about her understanding of Blackstone, but potentially about her father as well. Later that night, in the safety of her apartment, Sarah opened the file with shaking hands. What she found inside left her breathless. Documents, photos, and handwritten notes told a story she could scarcely believe. A story of idealism turned to pragmatism, of good intentions paving the way to morally questionable actions. At the center of it all was a photo that made Sarah's heart stop. It showed a younger Victor Blackstone standing alongside her father, Michael Thompson. They were smiling, arms around each other's shoulders, looking for all the world like the best of friends. As Sarah delved deeper into the contents of the file, a complex picture began to emerge. Her father and Blackstone had indeed been close once, united in a vision to tackle corruption and injustice in New York City. But somewhere along the way, their methods had diverged. Blackstone had chosen to fight fire with fire, building his own empire of influence and control, while Michael Thompson had apparently tried to maintain his principles. The final pages of the file contained correspondence between Blackstone and her father from the months leading up to Michael's death. The tone was tense, filled with veiled threats and pleas for understanding. It was clear that whatever partnership they had once shared had deteriorated into a dangerous antagonism. As Sarah finished reading, her mind was whirling with the implications of what she had discovered. Her father hadn't been corrupt, at least not in the way she had feared. But his relationship with Blackstone was far more complex than she could have imagined. She sat back, tears streaming down her face as she grappled with this new reality. Her father had been trying to stop Blackstone, to expose the very corruption she was now fighting against. But at what cost? And how much danger was she in now, having been entrusted with this information? As the first light of dawn began to creep through her windows, Sarah made a decision. She couldn't face this alone anymore. She needed to share what she had learned with James and Rodriguez to figure out their next move together. But as she reached for her phone to arrange a meeting, a sharp knock at her door made her freeze. Who could be at her door at this hour? With her heart pounding, Sarah moved cautiously towards the entrance, every nerve on high alert. As she peered through the peephole, her blood ran cold. Standing in the hallway, looking grim and determined, was Victor Blackstone himself. In that moment, Sarah knew that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Whatever game Blackstone was playing, whatever test this had been, she sensed that the final act was about to begin. And as she stood there, the damning file clutched to her chest. Sarah Thompson, daughter of Michael, undercover agent, and unwitting pawn in a decades-old conflict, prepared herself for a confrontation that would change everything. Little did she know that the revelations of the night were just the beginning. As she steeled herself to face Blackstone, forces were already in motion that would shake the very foundations of New York's power structure and force Sarah to question everything she thought she knew about justice, loyalty, and the thin line between right and wrong. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she stood frozen before the door, the weight of Blackstone's file heavy in her hands. Time seemed to stretch into an eternity as she wrestled with her options. Should she pretend not to be home, try to hide the evidence, or face Blackstone head-on? Another sharp knock jolted her into action. Taking a deep breath, Sarah quickly slid the file under a loose floorboard she'd discovered weeks ago, a hiding place she had hoped never to use. With trembling hands, she smoothed her hair and straightened her clothes, trying to compose herself before facing the man who held the key to so many of her questions. As she opened the door, Sarah found herself face to face with Victor Blackstone. His silver hair was slightly disheveled, and his piercing green eyes bore into her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "Mr. Blackstone," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady, "this is unexpected. Is everything all right?" Blackstone's lips curved into a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. "May I come in, Olivia? Or should I say, Sarah?" The use of her real name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her carefully constructed world seemed to crumble around her as she realized that her cover was blown. Still, years of training kicked in, and she managed to maintain her composure. "I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Blackstone," she said, clinging to her alias like a lifeline. "My name is Olivia Wells, as you know." Blackstone chuckled, a low, dangerous sound that sent chills down Sarah's spine. "Let's dispense with the charade, shall we? I know exactly who you are, Sarah Thompson, daughter of Michael Thompson, my old friend and eventual adversary. Did you really think you could fool me so easily?" As he spoke, Blackstone pushed past her into the apartment, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process this sudden turn of events. How long had he known? What was his end game? "How?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. Blackstone turned to face her, his expression a mix of amusement and something darker, more complex. "I've known since the moment you walked into my office for that interview. Did you think I wouldn't recognize Michael's daughter? You have his eyes, you know, that same fire, that same stubborn determination." Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. All these months of careful deception, of walking the razor's edge between her true self and her cover identity, had been for nothing. Blackstone had known all along, had been playing her just as she thought she had been playing him. "Why?" she asked, finding her voice at last. "If you knew who I was, why did you hire me? Why let me get so close?" Blackstone moved to the window, gazing out at the New York skyline as he spoke. "Because I wanted to see what you would do. I wanted to understand what drove you, what you were truly after. Was it revenge for your father? Justice? Or something more?" He turned back to her, his eyes searching her face. "I saw in you the same potential I once saw in Michael, the ability to see beyond the surface, to understand the complexities of the world we live in. I hoped you might come to understand why I do what I do, why your father and I chose different paths." Sarah's mind whirled with the implications of his words. "The file you gave me," she said slowly. The story of you and my father. Was that all true?" Blackstone nodded, a flicker of what might have been regret passing across his face. "Every word. Michael was my closest friend once. My partner in trying to change this city for the better. But he couldn't see that sometimes. To fight the darkness, you have to step into the shadows yourself." As he spoke, Sarah's training kicked in. She began to analyze the situation, looking for angles, for ways to turn this unexpected confrontation to her advantage. If Blackstone was here, opening up to her like this, he must have a reason beyond mere revelation. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steadier now, infused with a strength she didn't entirely feel. Blackstone's eyes locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. "I want you to join me, Sarah, to finish what your father and I started all those years ago. Together, we could reshape this city, root out the true corruption that plagues it. With your skills and my resources, we could achieve what Michael only dreamed of. The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with possibilities and dangers. Sarah's mind raced, weighing her options. Could she pretend to accept, to go deeper undercover than she had ever been before? Or was it time to make a stand, to confront Blackstone with the evidence she had gathered? Before she could respond, a sharp knock at the door cut through the tension. Sarah's heart leapt into her throat as she heard a familiar voice call out, "Sarah, are you in there? It's James. We need to talk." Blackstone's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing in them. "Ah," he said softly, "it seems we have company. Your handler, I presume. Or perhaps something more." Sarah felt as if she were balancing on a knife's edge. James's arrival had complicated an already volatile situation. She needed to think fast, to find a way to protect him while not revealing the full extent of their operation. "Mr. Blackstone," she began, her mind working furiously to craft a plausible explanation. But before she could continue, Blackstone held up a hand, silencing her. "No more lies, Sarah," he said, his voice low and intense. "It's time for you to make a choice. Open that door, and you're choosing a path that can only lead to conflict between us. But stand with me, and we can avoid bloodshed. We can find a way forward that honors your father's memory while achieving real change in this city." As James knocked again, more insistently this time, Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Her entire world had been turned upside down in the span of a few short hours. The man she had been investigating, the figure she had seen as the embodiment of corruption, was offering her a partnership. And in his eyes, she saw a glimmer of the idealism that must have once drawn her father to him. But could she trust him? Could she turn her back on everything she had been fighting for? On James and Detective Rodriguez, on the mission that had given her life new purpose. As she stood there, caught between Blackstone and the door, Sarah Thompson faced the most crucial decision of her life. Whatever choice she made in the next few moments would set her on a path from which there was no turning back. It would define not just her future, but potentially the future of New York City itself. With her heart pounding and her mind racing, Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She looked from Blackstone to the door and back again, knowing that her next words would change everything. "Mr. Blackstone?" she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. But before she could finish, the world exploded into chaos. The door burst open with a thunderous crash, and armed figures in tactical gear swarmed into the apartment. Shouts of "NYPD! Freeze!" filled the air as Sarah found herself caught in the middle of a scene she could never have anticipated. In the confusion, she saw James enter, his face a mask of concern and determination. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent communication passing between them. Then her attention was drawn back to Blackstone, who stood calmly amidst the chaos, a small, enigmatic smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Well, Sarah," he said softly, even as officers moved to restrain him, "it seems the choice has been made for us. But remember, this is far from over. The game is just beginning." As handcuffs were placed on Blackstone and Miranda rights were read, Sarah felt as if she were watching the scene from outside herself. The carefully constructed world she had been living in for months had come crashing down around her, and she was left standing in the rubble, unsure of what would come next. James approached her, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and concern. "Sarah," he said softly, "are you all right? We came as soon as we realized Blackstone had left his office. We feared—" Sarah nodded numbly, still trying to process everything that had happened. "I'm fine," she managed to say. "But James, there's so much you don't know, so much I've learned." As the officers began to clear the scene, taking Blackstone with them, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her journey. The truth about her father, about Blackstone, about the very nature of justice and corruption in New York City, it was all far more complex than she had ever imagined. Looking out at the New York skyline, the city she had sworn to protect and understand, Sarah Thompson realized that her real journey was only just beginning. The lines between right and wrong, between justice and corruption, had blurred beyond recognition. And she, the daughter of Michael Thompson, the undercover agent who had gotten too close, now stood at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape the very foundations of the city she called home. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, Sarah knew that the coming days would test her in ways she could never have anticipated. But with the truth finally beginning to emerge, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, determined to uncover the full story of her father's legacy and to find her own path in a world where nothing was as simple as it seemed. The hours following Blackstone's arrest passed in a blur for Sarah. She found herself in a stark interrogation room at the police precinct, the harsh fluorescent lights casting shadows under her eyes as she recounted the events of the night to Detective Rodriguez and a team of FBI agents who had been called in given the magnitude of the case. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of information she had gathered over the past months, weaving them into a coherent narrative. She told them about the file Blackstone had given her, about the complex history between him and her father, and about the offer he had made just before the raid. As she spoke, Sarah could see the expressions on the faces of the investigators shift from skepticism to shock and finally to a grim determination. The implications of what she was revealing were staggering, reaching far beyond a simple case of corporate corruption. "Yes, so you're saying that Blackstone and your father were once partners?" Rodriguez asked, his brow furrowed in concentration. "And that they were working together to fight corruption in the city?" Sarah nodded, her throat dry from hours of talking. "Yes, but something went wrong. They had different ideas about how to achieve their goals. My father wanted to work within the system, but Blackstone, he decided that the only way to fight corruption was to build his own power base." One of the FBI agents, a sharp-eyed woman named Agent Carter, leaned forward. "And you believe that your father's death was connected to this falling out?" Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'm certain of it. The file Blackstone gave me, it contained correspondence between them from the months leading up to my father's death. It was clear that they were at odds, that my father was threatening to expose something big." The room fell silent as the investigators absorbed this information. Sarah could almost see the gears turning in their minds, connecting dots and forming new theories. Finally, Rodriguez spoke again, his voice gentle. "Sarah, I know this has been an incredibly difficult and confusing time for you, but I need you to understand something. The information you've uncovered, the connections you've made, this goes far beyond anything we initially suspected. We're not just dealing with corporate crime here. This could potentially implicate some of the most powerful people in New York." Sarah nodded, a mix of emotions swirling within her. Fear, certainly, at the magnitude of what she had stumbled into, but also a fierce determination to see this through, to uncover the full truth about her father's work and his death. "I understand," she said, her voice steady, "and I want to help. Whatever it takes, I want to finish what my father started." Agent Carter exchanged a look with Rodriguez before turning back to Sarah. "We appreciate your willingness to cooperate, Ms. Thompson, but you need to understand the risks. If what you're saying is true, there are people out there who would go to great lengths to keep this information from coming to light." As if to underscore the agent's words, a commotion outside the interrogation room caught everyone's attention. Raised voices and the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway. Moments later, the door burst open, revealing a harried-looking junior officer. "Detective Rodriguez," the officer said, slightly out of breath. There's been a development. Blackstone, he's gone." The room erupted into chaos as the investigators demanded answers. How could a high-profile suspect like Victor Blackstone simply vanish from police custody? As theories were tossed back and forth, ranging from internal corruption to outside intervention, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered Blackstone's parting words to her, "The game is just beginning." Had this all been part of some larger plan? Had he allowed himself to be captured, knowing he had a way out? As the FBI agents rushed out to coordinate a manhunt and Rodriguez barked orders into his radio, Sarah found herself alone in the interrogation room, her mind reeling. She thought back to the moment in her apartment when Blackstone had offered her a choice. Now, with him in the wind and the true scope of the conspiracy beginning to unfold, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right decision. A soft knock at the door pulled Sarah from her thoughts. She looked up to see James entering the room, his face etched with concern. "Sarah," he said softly, taking a seat beside her. "Are you okay? I've been trying to check on you for hours, but with everything that's been happening." Sarah managed a weak smile, grateful for his presence. "I'm all right, James. Just overwhelmed. Everything I thought I knew about my father, about this case, it's all been turned upside down." James nodded, his blue eyes intense as he studied her face. "I know, and I'm sorry you had to go through all of this alone. But Sarah, you need to know. What you've uncovered, what you've done, it's incredible. You've blown this case wide open." His words warmed her, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. "But at what cost, James? Blackstone is out there somewhere, and he knows everything about me, about our operation. And there's still so much we don't understand about my father's involvement in all of this." James reached out, taking her hand in his. The gesture was comforting, grounding her in the midst of the chaos swirling around them. "We'll figure it out together," he said firmly. "Whatever comes next, you're not alone in this." As Sarah looked into James's eyes, she felt a surge of emotions she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, certainly, for his unwavering support. But there was something else there too, a warmth that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Before she could examine these feelings further, the door opened again and Detective Rodriguez entered, his face grim. "We've got a situation," he said without preamble. "Blackstone's escape has set off a chain reaction. We're getting reports of document shredding at several major corporations and law firms across the city. It seems like a coordinated effort to destroy evidence." Sarah's mind raced, connecting dots. "The network," she breathed. "Blackstone's network of corrupt officials and businessmen. They're trying to cover their tracks." Rodriguez nodded. "Exactly. And that's not all. We've received a threat. Against you, Sarah." James tensed beside her, his hand tightening around hers. "What kind of threat?" The detective's eyes were grave as he replied. An anonymous message was sent to the precinct. It said, "The daughter will share the father's fate if she doesn't back off." A chill ran through Sarah as the implications of the threat sank in. They knew who she was, knew about her connection to Michael Thompson. The carefully constructed walls between her undercover identity and her real life had completely crumbled. "What do we do now?" she asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Rodriguez straightened, his jaw set with determination. "We protect you first and foremost, and then we go on the offensive. Whatever Blackstone and his associates are trying to hide, we need to find it before they can destroy all the evidence." As they began to discuss strategies and safety measures, Sarah's mind wandered back to the file hidden beneath the floorboards in her apartment. The story of her father and Blackstone's partnership, the clues to what had driven them apart. It was all there, waiting to be uncovered. There's something else," she said, interrupting the discussion between James and Rodriguez. "The file Blackstone gave me. I hid it in my apartment before he arrived. It might hold the key to understanding all of this." James and Rodriguez exchanged a look before the detective nodded. "All right, we'll send a team to secure the file. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. From this moment on, you're no longer just a witness or an undercover operative. You're a key player in what might be the biggest corruption case this city has ever seen." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She thought of her father, of the risks he had taken to fight for what was right. She thought of Blackstone, of the complex web of power and corruption he had woven. And she thought of the city itself, the New York she had grown to love, now revealed to be a battleground between forces she was only beginning to understand. "I'm ready," she said, her voice filled with a determination that surprised even her. "Whatever it takes, I want to see this through. For my father, for justice, and for the truth." As Sarah, James, and Rodriguez began to outline their next steps, a sense of purpose filled the room. They were no longer just individuals caught up in a case. They were a team, united in their quest to unravel the conspiracy that had claimed Michael Thompson's life and threatened to undermine the very foundations of the city. Little did they know that their efforts were about to set off a chain reaction that would shake New York to its core, exposing decades of hidden corruption and forcing Sarah to confront truths about her father, herself, and the nature of justice that she could never have imagined. As the first light of a new day began to filter through the precinct windows, Sarah Thompson stood poised on the brink of a journey that would test her courage, her loyalty, and her very understanding of right and wrong. The game, as Blackstone had said, was indeed just beginning. The following days unfolded in a whirlwind of activity as Sarah, James, and the investigative team delved deeper into the web of corruption that Blackstone had woven across New York City. Sarah's apartment had been secured as a crime scene, the hidden file retrieved and now under intense scrutiny by a team of forensic accountants and investigators. Sarah found herself at the heart of the investigation, her unique perspective and intimate knowledge of both Blackstone's operation and her father's past, making her an invaluable asset. She spent long hours in secure briefing rooms, poring over documents and connecting dots that others might have missed. It was on the third day after Blackstone's escape that a breakthrough came. Sarah was reviewing a series of financial transactions detailed in her father's notes when something caught her eye, a pattern of transfers, seemingly innocuous on their own, but when viewed together, painted a picture of a massive slush fund. "James," she called out, her voice tight with excitement. "I think I've found something." James hurried over, his brow furrowed in concentration as he leaned in to examine the documents spread out before Sarah. As she explained her discovery, his eyes widened in recognition. "This is big, Sarah," he said, his voice low and intense. "If we can trace these funds, we might be able to identify key players in Blackstone's network." They quickly brought their findings to Detective Rodriguez and Agent Carter. The room buzzed with renewed energy as the team began to follow the money trail, uncovering a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts that seemed to touch every corner of New York's power structure. As the investigation progressed, Sarah couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The deeper they dug, the more she realized that the corruption they were uncovering went far beyond anything she had initially imagined. It wasn't just a few crooked businessmen or corrupt officials. It was an entire system built on graft and influence peddling. One evening, as she and James were working late, poring over a particularly complex set of financial records, Sarah voiced her concerns. "James," she said softly, pushing away from the desk and rubbing her tired eyes, "do you ever wonder if we're in over our heads? The more we uncover, the more it seems like we're just scratching the surface of something much bigger." James looked up, his blue eyes filled with a mix of determination and understanding. "I know what you mean," he replied, running a hand through his hair. "It's overwhelming, but that's exactly why we can't give up. If this conspiracy is as far-reaching as it seems, then exposing it could change everything." Sarah nodded, drawing strength from his conviction. "You're right. It's just, I keep thinking about my father, about Blackstone. They started out wanting to make a difference too. What if we end up going down the same path?" James reached out, taking her hand in his. The gesture was becoming familiar, a source of comfort in the chaos that had become their lives. "We won't," he said firmly, "because we have each other. We'll keep each other in check, remind each other why we're doing this." As Sarah looked into James's eyes, she felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. In the midst of all the uncertainty and danger, he had become her anchor. a steady presence she could rely on. Their moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Agent Carter entered, her face grave. "We've got a problem," she announced without preamble. Judge Harrington was just found dead in his home." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Judge Harrington, the same judge she had delivered documents to on Blackstone's orders months ago. "How?" she managed to ask. "Apparent suicide," Carter replied, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it for a second. "But given what we know now about his connections to Blackstone's network, we're treating it as a probable homicide." The implications were clear. Someone was tying up loose ends, silencing potential witnesses before they could talk. "We need to move faster," James said, his jaw set with determination. "Every hour we delay gives them more time to cover their tracks." Sarah nodded in agreement, her mind already racing with possibilities. "What about the offshore accounts we traced? If we could freeze those assets, it might force some of Blackstone's associates out of hiding." Carter's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "Nah, that could work. I'll get our financial crimes unit on it right away." As the agent left to set things in motion, Sarah turned back to the mountain of documents before them. She knew they were close to unraveling something big, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were also running out of time. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah barely slept, fueled by coffee and adrenaline, as she and the team raced to connect the dots and build an airtight case against Blackstone's network. Their efforts began to bear fruit, one by one. Key players in the conspiracy started to emerge from the shadows. A prominent real estate developer turned himself in, offering to cooperate in exchange for leniency. A high-ranking police official was arrested trying to flee the country. But for every victory, there seemed to be a new setback. Evidence would disappear from locked rooms. Witnesses would suddenly recant their statements or vanish altogether. It was clear that they were up against a powerful and resourceful enemy, one that had tentacles reaching into every corner of the city's power structure. Through it all, Sarah found herself drawing on strengths she never knew she possessed. Her years of observing from the shadows as a hotel cleaner had honed her ability to spot patterns and inconsistencies. Her experiences undercover in Blackstone's organization had given her insights into how the corrupt elite operated. But more than that, she felt driven by a sense of purpose that went beyond mere justice. This was about honoring her father's memory, about finishing the work he had started all those years ago. It was late one night, as Sarah was reviewing a particularly cryptic set of documents, that a realization struck her. She had been so focused on unraveling the conspiracy, on bringing down Blackstone and his network, that she had lost sight of the bigger picture. "James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think I understand now. What my father and Blackstone were trying to do in the beginning, before it all went wrong." James looked up from his own work, his eyes curious. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. They saw the same things we're seeing now, a system so corrupt, so entrenched, that it seemed impossible to change from within. But where Blackstone chose to build his own empire of corruption to fight fire with fire, my father, I think he was looking for a different way. She shuffled through the papers before her, pulling out a series of notes in her father's handwriting. "Look at this." He was developing a plan, a way to expose the entire network at once, to create a shockwave that would force real change. James leaned in, his eyes scanning the documents with growing excitement. "Sarah, this is incredible. If we could figure out what your father was planning, complete his work, we might be able to break the cycle." Sarah finished, feeling a surge of hope for the first time in days. Not just take down Blackstone, but create an opportunity for real, systemic change. As they dove into the documents with renewed vigor, Sarah felt a shift in the energy around them. They weren't just investigators anymore, piecing together a case. They were revolutionaries, carrying on the vision that her father and Blackstone had once shared, before ambition and fear had twisted it into something darker. But even as hope bloomed within her, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging sense of foreboding. They were getting close to something big, something that powerful people would do anything to keep hidden. And somewhere out there, Victor Blackstone was watching, waiting for his moment to strike. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows of their makeshift war room, Sarah Thompson stood at a crossroads. The path ahead was fraught with danger, the stakes higher than she could have ever imagined. But she knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that this was her destiny, her chance to make a real difference in the world her father had fought and died for. Little did Sarah know that the coming days would test her in ways she could never have anticipated. The final confrontation with Blackstone loomed on the horizon, a showdown that would force her to question everything she thought she knew about justice, loyalty, and the true nature of power in the city she called home. The following week was a whirlwind of activity as Sarah, James, and the investigative team raced against time to unravel the full extent of her father's plan. They worked tirelessly, poring over Michael Thompson's notes, cross-referencing them with the evidence they had gathered on Blackstone's network, and slowly piecing together a strategy that was as brilliant as it was audacious. It was on a particularly grueling night, as the clock ticked past 2 in the morning, that Sarah finally felt the pieces click into place. She sat back in her chair, her eyes wide with the magnitude of what they had uncovered. "James," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think I've got it. I know what my father was planning." James looked up from his own stack of documents, his blue eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep but sharp with interest. "What is it, Sarah?" Sarah took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. It's not just about exposing individual corrupt officials or businessmen. Dad was aiming for something much bigger. He was building a case to prove that the entire system is rigged, from the lowest levels of city government all the way up to the federal level. She spread out a series of documents on the table between them. "Look at these: financial records, communication logs, sworn statements from whistleblowers." Dad was collecting evidence of a vast conspiracy that goes beyond anything we've imagined. It's not just about bribery or embezzlement. It's about a systematic effort to manipulate markets, influence elections, and essentially control the fate of the entire city. James leaned in, his eyes scanning the documents with growing excitement. "Sarah, this is incredible. If we can verify all of this, it would be the biggest corruption scandal in American history." Sarah nodded, feeling a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. But that's not all. Dad wasn't just gathering evidence. He was developing a plan to release it in a way that would make it impossible to cover up or ignore. He called it Operation Sunlight. As Sarah outlined the details of her father's plan, she could see the implications dawning on James's face. Operation Sunlight was designed to release a carefully curated set of evidence to key media outlets, law enforcement agencies, and public watchdog groups simultaneously. The information would be structured in a way that each piece would lead to the next, creating a domino effect of revelations that would bring the entire corrupt system crashing down. "It's brilliant," James breathed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "By releasing the information this way, it becomes self-perpetuating. Each new revelation would spur further investigations, making it impossible for anyone to stop the flow of information once it starts." Sarah felt a surge of pride for her father's ingenuity, tempered by a deep sadness for what it had cost him. "This is why they killed him," she said softly. "Blackstone and the others, they must have found out what he was planning." James reached out, taking her hand in his. The gesture had become so natural between them, a source of comfort and strength in the midst of the storm they were navigating. "Your father was a hero, Sarah, and now we have the chance to finish what he started." As the reality of what they had uncovered sank in, Sarah felt a mix of emotions washing over her: excitement at the prospect of finally bringing the truth to light, fear of the powerful forces that would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden, and a deep, burning determination to see this through, no matter the cost. We need to move fast, she said, her voice taking on a new edge of urgency. Now that we know what we're looking for, we can fill in the gaps in Dad's evidence. But we have to assume that Blackstone knows we're onto something. He won't sit idle while we build our case. James nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll call Rodriguez and Agent Carter. We need to bring them up to speed and start putting the pieces in place for Operation Sunlight. The next 72 hours were a blur of activity. Sarah, James, and the team worked around the clock, verifying evidence, establishing secure communication channels with trusted journalists and watchdog groups, and preparing for the moment when they would release the floodgates of information. As they worked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Small incidents, a car that seemed to be following her, a strange click on the phone line during a call with James, added to her growing sense of unease. She knew they were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were getting higher by the hour. It was late on the third night when Sarah's worst fears were realized. She was alone in the secure room they had been using as their base of operations, double-checking a series of financial records, when she heard a noise that made her blood run cold. The soft click of the door locking from the outside. Heart pounding. Sarah reached for her phone, only to find that it had no signal. She was cut off, trapped, and she had a sickening feeling that she knew who was behind it. As if on cue, a familiar voice came through the room's intercom system. "Hello, Sarah. I think it's time we had a chat, don't you?" Victor Blackstone's smooth, cultured tones filled the room, sending a chill down Sarah's spine. She straightened, forcing herself to project a calm she didn't feel. "Blackstone, I was wondering when you'd show your face again." A low chuckle came through the speakers. "Oh, I've been around, my dear, watching, waiting. I must say, I'm impressed with what you and your team have accomplished. Your father would be proud." Sarah's eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of surveillance equipment. "What do you want, Blackstone?" "What I've always wanted, Sarah. To finish what your father and I started all those years ago, to change this city for the better." Sarah couldn't help but scoff. "By building your own empire of corruption. By having my father killed when he threatened to expose you." There was a pause, and when Blackstone spoke again, there was a hint of something almost like regret in his voice. Michael's death was regrettable. A mistake made by overzealous subordinates who didn't understand the bigger picture. But Sarah, you have to understand, the system we're fighting against is so entrenched, so powerful, that sometimes we have to work outside the law to achieve real justice. As Blackstone continued to speak, laying out his vision of a city controlled by his network but free from the corruption of the old guard, Sarah felt a moment of vertigo. His words echoed the arguments she had heard in boardrooms and back alleys throughout her undercover work, the justifications used by those who saw themselves as above the law. But then she thought of her father, of the integrity and determination that had driven him to risk everything for the truth. She thought of James, of Rodriguez and Carter, of all the honest people fighting to make a difference within the system. You're wrong, Blackstone," she said, her voice steady and clear. "What you're proposing isn't justice. It's just another form of corruption, dressed up in noble intentions. My father understood that. That's why he was working to expose all of it. Your network included." Blackstone's voice hardened. "I had hoped you would understand, Sarah, that you would see the necessity of what we're doing, but I see you're as idealistic as your father was. It's a shame, really. We could have accomplished great things together." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at the implied threat in his words. "What are you going to do, Blackstone? Kill me like you killed my father?" "Oh, Sarah," Blackstone replied, a note of genuine sadness in his voice. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't allow you to destroy everything we've built. I'm offering you one last chance. Join me. Help me guide this city into a new era. Or..." The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Sarah's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. She knew that James and the others would be looking for her, but would they find her in time? As the silence stretched on, Sarah made a decision. She thought of her father, of the courage he had shown in the face of overwhelming odds. She thought of the evidence they had gathered, of the potential to create real, lasting change in the city she loved. "I'm sorry, Blackstone," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "But I can't do that. I won't betray my father's memory or my own principles. Whatever you're planning, I'll fight you every step of the way." There was a long pause, and when Blackstone spoke again, all trace of warmth had vanished from his voice. "I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah. Truly I am, but you've made your choice. I hope you're prepared to face the consequences." As the intercom clicked off, Sarah felt a wave of dread wash over her. She knew that Blackstone wouldn't make idle threats. Whatever he had planned, she had to find a way to warn James and the others before it was too late. Frantically, she began to search the room for any means of communication, any way to get a message out. As she worked, her mind raced with possibilities. What was Blackstone planning? How much did he know about Operation Sunlight? And most importantly, how could she stop him before he destroyed everything they had worked for? As the minutes ticked by, Sarah Thompson, daughter of Michael, protégé of Blackstone, and now the linchpin in a conspiracy that threatened to shake New York City to its core, steeled herself for the fight of her life. Whatever came next, she was determined to see her father's mission through to the end, no matter the cost. Little did she know that the final confrontation with Blackstone was just hours away, a showdown that would test her courage, her convictions, and her very understanding of justice in ways she could never have imagined. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness as Sarah frantically searched the room for any means of escape or communication. Her mind raced, cycling through every piece of training she had received, every skill she had honed during her time undercover. There had to be a way out, some overlooked detail that could turn the tables in her favor. As she ran her hands along the edges of the room's paneling, searching for any hidden compartments or weaknesses, Sarah's thoughts turned to James. By now, he must have realized something was wrong. She could almost picture him, his brow furrowed with concern, mobilizing every resource at their disposal to find her. The thought gave her strength, steeling her resolve to fight on. Suddenly, her fingers caught on a slight irregularity in the wall's surface. Heart pounding, Sarah pressed harder, feeling a small section of the panel give way. Behind it, she found a tangle of wires, part of the room's surveillance system. A plan began to form in her mind, a desperate gambit born of necessity and the knowledge gleaned from months of working in Blackstone's world. With careful precision, Sarah began to manipulate the wires, drawing on everything she had learned about the building's security systems during her time as Olivia Wells. If she could just reroute the right connections, she might be able to send a signal, a cry for help that James and the team would recognize. As she worked, Sarah's mind drifted back to her father. She imagined Michael Thompson in a similar situation, facing impossible odds with nothing but his wits and determination. The thought filled her with a fierce pride and a renewed sense of purpose. She was her father's daughter, and she would not go down without a fight. Minutes stretched into hours as Sarah painstakingly rewired the system, her fingers raw and bleeding from the delicate work. Just as she was beginning to lose hope, a soft beep indicated that her makeshift transmitter had come online. Holding her breath, Sarah tapped out a message in Morse code, a distress signal followed by her location. Now, all she could do was wait and hope that someone on the outside was listening. Meanwhile, across the city, James paced the floor of their makeshift command center, his face a mask of worry and frustration. It had been over 6 hours since anyone had last heard from Sarah, and every attempt to contact her had failed. "We need to expand the search," he insisted, turning to Detective Rodriguez and Agent Carter. "She wouldn't just disappear like this. Something's wrong, I can feel it." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "We've got every available unit on the lookout, James, but the city's a big place, and Blackstone has a lot of hideouts. We need something more to go on." As if in answer to his words, a junior technician burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "We've got something," he exclaimed. "A strange signal coming from an old Blackstone property downtown." It's weak, but it looks like Morse code. James was at the technician's side in an instant, his heart racing as he watched the signal being decoded. As the message became clear, a mix of relief and determination washed over him. "It's Sarah," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "She's alive, and she's given us her location." The room erupted into a flurry of activity as a rescue operation was hastily planned. James insisted on being part of the team, his face set with a determination that brooked no argument. As they geared up, he caught Rodriguez's eye. "We'll get her back," the detective said firmly, clapping James on the shoulder. And then we'll end this, once and for all." As the rescue team mobilized, Sarah continued her efforts to find a way out of her prison. She had managed to pry loose a section of the wall panel, revealing the building's infrastructure behind it. If she could just find a way to short-circuit the door's electronic lock. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life once more. I must say, Sarah, I'm impressed." Blackstone's voice filled the room, a hint of amusement in his tone. "You're even more resourceful than I gave you credit for, but I'm afraid your little signal won't do you much good." Sarah's blood ran cold. How had he known? Had she inadvertently tipped her hand? "You see," Blackstone continued, "while you've been busy playing electrician, my team has been putting the final touches on our contingency plan. By this time tomorrow, Operation Sunlight will be nothing but a memory, and New York will enter a new era, my era." Sarah's mind raced, trying to decipher the meaning behind Blackstone's words. What was he planning, and how could she stop it from inside this room? "It doesn't have to be this way, Blackstone," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "There's still time to do the right thing. To use your influence for real change, the way you and my father originally intended." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might have gotten through to him. But when Blackstone spoke again, his voice was cold and resolute. "I'm afraid it's far too late for that, my dear. The wheels are already in motion. I had hoped you would see reason, that you would join me in building a better future for this city. But now, well, let's just say that your usefulness has come to an end." The implications of his words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Whatever Blackstone was planning, it was clear that she was not meant to survive it. As if to underscore the direness of her situation, Sarah heard a faint hissing sound. Her eyes widened in horror as she realized that gas was being pumped into the room through the ventilation system. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Sarah forced it down, drawing on every ounce of training and inner strength she possessed. She had come too far, fought too hard, to give up now. With renewed determination, she returned to her work on the door's locking mechanism, knowing that her life, and perhaps the fate of the entire city, depended on her ability to escape. As Sarah worked feverishly, her breath coming in short gasps as the air in the room grew thinner, she could hear the faint sounds of commotion in the distance. Shouts, the pounding of feet, the unmistakable sound of a breach charge being set. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? With a final, desperate effort, Sarah managed to short-circuit the lock. The door swung open with a soft hiss, and she stumbled out into the hallway, her lungs burning as she gulped in fresh air. She had only taken a few steps when she heard a voice that made her heart leap. "Sarah!" James rounded the corner, his face a mix of relief and concern as he saw her. He rushed to her side, supporting her as she swayed on her feet. "James!" she gasped, fighting to catch her breath. "We have to hurry. Blackstone, he's planning something big. We need to stop him before it's too late." As James quickly filled her in on what they had learned, that Blackstone was holed up in the building's penthouse suite, apparently making final preparations for some grand scheme, Sarah's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information she had gathered. "I think I know what he's planning," she said, her voice growing stronger as the effects of the gas began to wear off. "He's going to try to release his own version of Operation Sunlight, a carefully curated set of information that will discredit our evidence and paint him as the hero." James's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. If he succeeds, it could turn public opinion in his favor, We'd lose any chance of bringing him and his network to justice. Sarah nodded grimly. Exactly. We need to get to that penthouse and stop him before he can put his plan into action. As they made their way through the building, joined by Rodriguez, Carter, and the rest of the rescue team, Sarah felt a surge of determination. This was it. The final confrontation, the moment that would determine the fate of New York City and the legacy of her father's work. The elevator ride to the penthouse seemed to take an eternity. Sarah used the time to brief the team on what she had learned, outlining a hasty plan to counter Blackstone's scheme. As the doors opened onto the luxurious top floor, everyone tensed, ready for whatever might await them. What they found, however, was not what anyone had expected. The penthouse was a scene of controlled chaos. Dozens of computer screens lined the walls, each displaying different news feeds, social media trends, and data streams. In the center of it all stood Victor Blackstone, looking calm and collected as he directed a team of operatives. As Sarah and the others burst into the room, weapons drawn, Blackstone turned to face them, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sarah," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I was wondering when you'd join us. I must say you've exceeded all my expectations. Your father would be proud." Sarah's grip tightened on her weapon, her eyes never leaving Blackstone's face. "It's over, Victor. Whatever you're planning, it stops now." Blackstone's smile widened, taking on a predatory edge. "Oh, my dear, it's not over. It's only just beginning." With a dramatic flourish, he pressed a button on the console before him. Immediately, the screens around the room came to life, displaying a carefully crafted message that began to spread across social media platforms and news outlets at an alarming rate. As Sarah watched in horror, she realized that Blackstone had not just been preparing to discredit their evidence, he had co-opted Operation Sunlight itself, twisting it to serve his own ends. The information being released was a mix of truth and carefully constructed lies, all designed to paint Blackstone as a crusading reformer fighting against a corrupt system. "You see, Sarah," Blackstone said, his voice filled with a twisted sense of triumph, "I learned from your father's mistake. It's not enough to simply expose corruption. You have to control the narrative to shape public perception. And now, thanks to the groundwork you and your team so helpfully laid, I'm about to become the most powerful man in New York." As the implications of Blackstone's plan sank in, Sarah felt a moment of despair. Had they come so far, fought so hard, only to have their efforts turned against them at the last moment? But then she thought of her father, of the courage and integrity that had driven him to fight against impossible odds. She thought of James, of Rodriguez and Carter, of all the honest people who had risked everything to bring the truth to light. With a renewed sense of determination, Sarah stepped forward, her eyes locked on Blackstone's. "You're wrong, Victor," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You may think you've won, but you've underestimated the people of this city. They're smarter than you give them credit for. They'll see through your lies, and when they do, they'll demand the real truth." As Sarah spoke, she could see a flicker of uncertainty cross Blackstone's face. For the first time, he seemed to realize that his carefully laid plans might not be as foolproof as he had believed. The stage was set for a final, dramatic showdown, a battle not just for control of New York City, but for the very soul of justice itself. As Sarah prepared to make her stand, she knew that the next few moments would determine not just her fate, but the future of the city she had come to love. Little did anyone in that room realize that the true test was yet to come, a revelation that would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew and force Sarah to make the most difficult decision of her life. The tension in the penthouse was palpable as Sarah and Blackstone faced off, surrounded by the chaos of screens flickering with the unfolding drama of Operation Sunlight. The rest of the team stood at the ready, weapons drawn, but everyone seemed to sense that this final confrontation would be decided not by force, but by the battle of wills between these two formidable opponents. "You're bluffing, Sarah," Blackstone said, his voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. The people will believe what they want to believe, and right now they want a hero, someone to save them from the corrupt system that's been holding them down for years. Sarah took a step forward, her eyes never leaving Blackstone's face. You're right about one thing, Victor. People do want a hero, but they also want the truth. And deep down, they know the difference between real justice and a carefully crafted lie. As she spoke, Sarah's mind raced, drawing on everything she had learned about Blackstone's operation, about her father's work, and about the complex web of power and corruption that held New York City in its grip. She knew that to win this battle, she needed to do more than just expose Blackstone's lies. She needed to offer an alternative, a vision of justice and transparency that could capture the public's imagination. "James," she said, her voice low and urgent, "the backup files we prepared, the ones with the unaltered evidence. Can you access them from here?" James nodded, already moving towards one of the computer terminals. "I think so, if I can bypass their security protocols." Blackstone's eyes narrowed as he watched this exchange. "Whatever you're planning, it won't work," he said, but there was a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "I control the narrative now. The story is already out there, spreading faster than you can possibly counter." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "You're forgetting something, Victor. My father didn't just gather evidence. He built relationships, connections with people who believed in his vision of a just and transparent society. And those people are still out there, waiting for a signal to act." As she spoke, Sarah reached for her phone, praying that the secure messaging app they had set up weeks ago was still operational. With quick, decisive movements, she typed out a series of coded messages, activating a network of trusted journalists, whistleblowers, and digital activists that her father had cultivated over years. Blackstone watched this with growing alarm. "What are you doing?" he demanded, taking a step towards Sarah. But before he could reach her, Rodriguez and Carter moved to intercept him. "That's far enough, Blackstone," Rodriguez growled. "It's over." As if to underscore his words, the screens around the room began to flicker and change. James had succeeded in accessing their secure files, and now the true, unaltered evidence of Blackstone's crimes began to flood the airwaves and social media platforms. But Sarah knew that raw data alone wouldn't be enough to counter the narrative Blackstone had crafted. She needed to give the public a story they could believe in, a vision of hope to counter the cynicism and despair that Blackstone's revelations had sown. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped in front of one of the cameras that was live streaming the unfolding drama. "People of New York," she began, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Sarah Thompson. Some of you may recognize me as the daughter of Michael Thompson, a man who dedicated his life to fighting corruption in this city." As she spoke, Sarah could see the view counts on the screen skyrocketing. Millions of people across the city and beyond were tuning in, drawn by the drama unfolding before their eyes. "Tonight, you've been bombarded with information, accusations, and promises of reform," Sarah continued. "But I'm here to tell you that the truth is both simpler and more complex than what you've been shown. The corruption that plagues our city isn't the work of any one man or group. It's a system, one that has grown and evolved over decades, ensnaring both the powerful and the powerless in its web." Sarah paused, letting her words sink in. She could see Blackstone out of the corner of her eye, his face a mask of fury and disbelief as he watched his carefully constructed narrative begin to crumble. "But there is hope," Sarah went on, her voice gaining strength. "My father believed, as I do, that the people of this city are its greatest strength, that when armed with the truth and united in purpose, we have the power to create real, lasting change. The evidence you're seeing now, the full, unaltered story of the corruption that has plagued our city, isn't meant to demoralize you. It's a call to action." As Sarah spoke, James worked feverishly at the computer terminal, ensuring that every piece of evidence, every document and recording was made available to the public. The screens around the room began to fill with reactions from across the city, expressions of shock, anger, and, increasingly, determination. "We stand at a crossroads," Sarah continued, her eyes blazing with passion. "We can choose to give in to cynicism and despair, to believe that nothing will ever change, or we can choose to stand up, to demand better from our leaders and from ourselves. The road ahead won't be easy. Real change never is. But together, we can build a New York that lives up to its promise, a city of true justice and opportunity for all." As Sarah finished speaking, the room fell silent for a moment. Then, slowly, a sound began to build, first from the streets below, then spreading across the city. It was the sound of people coming together, of voices raised in unison, demanding change. Blackstone, who had been watching this unfold with growing horror, suddenly lunged for the control panel. "No!" he shouted. "I won't let you destroy everything I've built." But before he could reach it, James intercepted him, tackling Blackstone to the ground. The two men grappled, rolling across the floor as Rodriguez and Carter moved in to assist. In the chaos, Sarah's eyes were drawn to a small, inconspicuous device that had fallen from Blackstone's pocket during the struggle. With a jolt of recognition, she realized it was a dead man's switch, likely connected to some final, devastating failsafe. Time seemed to slow as Sarah weighed her options. She could easily destroy the device, ensuring that whatever final card Blackstone had to play would never see the light of day. But as she reached for it, a thought struck her. What if this device contained even more damning evidence? What if it was the key to unraveling the last, most deeply buried secrets of Blackstone's network? The choice before her was clear, but the implications were staggering. Destroying the device would bring a clean end to this chapter, allowing the city to move forward with the process of healing and reform. But activating it could potentially expose even deeper layers of corruption, possibly implicating figures that had so far remained untouched by their investigation. As Sarah stood there, the device in her hand, she felt the weight of her father's legacy, of the city's future, pressing down on her. The sounds of the struggle behind her faded away as she focused on this one crucial decision. In that moment, Sarah Thompson, the hotel cleaner turned unlikely heroine, the daughter carrying on her father's fight for justice, held the fate of New York City in her hands. Whatever choice she made would have far-reaching consequences, not just for her and those around her, but for millions of people who called this city home. Little did Sarah know that her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would not only reshape the political and social landscape of New York, but would also force her to confront the deepest, most personal aspects of her own identity and beliefs. As she stood on the precipice of this monumental choice, the true test of her character and the final chapter of her extraordinary journey was about to begin. In the tense silence that followed, Sarah's fingers closed around the dead man's switch, her mind racing with the potential consequences of her decision. The sounds of the struggle behind her faded into the background as she focused on this pivotal moment. Taking a deep breath, Sarah made her choice. With steady hands, she activated the device. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then suddenly, every screen in the room flickered to life, displaying a cascade of data that made even James gasp in shock. "My God," he breathed, his eyes wide as he scanned the information pouring across the displays. "Sarah, it's everything. The entire network laid bare." As the team watched in stunned silence, the true scope of Blackstone's operation unfolded before them. It wasn't just a matter of local corruption or even national influence. The tentacles of this conspiracy reached across continents, implicating world leaders, global corporations, and shadowy organizations that had long been the stuff of conspiracy theories. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the magnitude of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just about New York anymore. This was a revelation that could reshape the entire global power structure. Blackston, who had been subdued by Rodriguez and Carter, let out a bitter laugh. You have no idea what you've done," he said, his voice a mix of anger and something that sounded almost like admiration. "You think exposing this will make the world a better place? You've just opened Pandora's box. Sarah, there's no going back from this." As if to underscore his words, alerts began to flash across the screens. News outlets around the world were picking up the story. Governments were issuing statements, and social media was exploding with reactions. Sarah felt a moment of doubt. Had she made the right choice? The sheer scale of what they had uncovered was overwhelming. How could they possibly hope to manage the fallout from this? But then she caught sight of her reflection in one of the darkened screens. In her eyes, she saw the same determination, the same unwavering commitment to justice that she had always admired in her father. This was what Michael Thompson had been working towards all along, a chance to pull back the curtain and show the world the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or dangerous that truth might be. With renewed resolve, Sarah turned to face her team. "We need to move fast," she said, her voice steady and clear. "James, start organizing this data. We need to prioritize the most critical information and get it into the hands of trusted journalists and investigators around the world." James nodded, already moving to the computer terminals. "On it. I'll activate our secure network of contacts. We'll need to be careful, though. There are going to be a lot of powerful people trying to bury this information." Rodriguez stepped forward, his face grim but determined. "I'll coordinate with federal agencies and Interpol. We're going to need an unprecedented level of international cooperation to follow up on all of this." As the team sprang into action, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Agent Carter, a look of quiet respect in her eyes. "Your father would be proud," Carter said softly. "You've taken his work further than he could have ever imagined." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat at the mention of her father. "I just hope I've done the right thing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Carter squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "The right thing isn't always the easy thing, Sarah, but exposing the truth, giving people the information they need to make informed decisions about their world, that's always right." As Sarah nodded, grateful for the support, a commotion near the elevators caught her attention. A group of people were pushing their way into the penthouse, led by a face she recognized from countless news broadcasts, the mayor of New York City. "What in God's name is going on here?" the mayor demanded, his face flushed with a mix of anger and fear. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The panic you're causing?" Sarah stepped forward, drawing herself up to her full height. In that moment, she was no longer the invisible hotel cleaner or the undercover operative. She was Sarah Thompson, daughter of Michael Thompson, and she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Mr. Mayor," she said, her voice calm but firm, "what's happening here is the exposure of a truth that's been hidden for far too long. Yes, it's going to cause upheaval. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but the people of this city, of this world, deserve to know what's really been going on behind the scenes." The mayor sputtered, his face growing redder. You can't just... This isn't... Do you have any idea of the chaos this will cause?" "Sometimes," Sarah replied, thinking of all she had learned and experienced over the past months. "We need a little chaos to break free from systems that no longer serve us. This isn't about destroying our institutions, Mr. Mayor. It's about giving us a chance to rebuild them, better and stronger than before." As she spoke, Sarah could see the fight going out of the mayor's eyes. He, like so many others, was beginning to realize that the world had changed irrevocably in the span of a few short hours. Over the next days and weeks, Sarah and her team worked tirelessly to manage the fallout from their revelations. The world seemed to teeter on the brink of chaos as governments fell, corporations crumbled, and long-held alliances shattered in the face of the exposed truths. But amid the turmoil, something remarkable began to happen. People, armed with knowledge and united in purpose, started to demand real change. Grassroots movements sprang up around the world, pushing for transparency, accountability, and a new kind of governance that truly served the needs of the many rather than the few. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, not as a leader, but as a symbol, a reminder of what could be accomplished when ordinary people stood up for what was right. She testified before congressional committees, spoke at international forums, and worked tirelessly to ensure that the truths they had uncovered were not buried or twisted to serve new agendas. Through it all, James remained by her side, a constant source of support and strength. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of their shared struggles, deepened into something profound and enduring. 1 year to the day after the events in Blackstone's penthouse, Sarah stood at her father's grave, a bouquet of flowers in her hand. The world was still in flux, still grappling with the revelations that had shaken it to its core. But there was hope now, a sense that real change was not only possible, but inevitable. "We did it, Dad," she said softly, placing the flowers on the grave. "It's not perfect, and there's still so much work to do. But we've given people a chance to see the truth, to make informed choices about their future. I think that's what you always wanted." As she stood there, lost in thought, Sarah felt a presence behind her. She turned to see James, his face softened with a mix of love and concern. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, taking one last look at her father's grave. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "There's still so much to do." As they walked hand in hand out of the cemetery, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. From an invisible hotel cleaner to a key player in a global revolution, she had faced challenges she could never have imagined. But through it all, she had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed. The road ahead was still long and fraught with difficulties. The world was in the process of rebuilding itself, and there would be those who would resist change, who would try to re-establish the old power structures. But Sarah was ready to face whatever came next. She was no longer just Michael Thompson's daughter, or the woman who had exposed Blackstone's network. She was Sarah Thompson, a force for change in her own right, ready to continue the fight for justice and transparency in this new, uncertain world. As they reached their car, Sarah paused, looking out over the New York skyline. The city had changed, just as the world had changed, but its spirit, the indomitable will of its people, remained as strong as ever. "What are you thinking?" James asked, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. Sarah smiled, a mix of determination and hope shining in her eyes. "I'm thinking that this is just the beginning. We've opened the door to change, but now comes the hard part, making sure that change leads us somewhere better." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Together?" he asked. "Together," Sarah affirmed, her voice strong and clear. As they drove away, heading towards their next challenge, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with dangers and revelations she could never have anticipated. But it had also led her to discover her true self, to honor her father's legacy, and to play a part in reshaping the world for the better. Whatever the future held, Sarah Thompson was ready to face it head-on, armed with the truth, supported by those she loved, and driven by an unwavering commitment to justice. The invisible hotel cleaner had become a beacon of hope for millions, and her story was far from over. As the sun set over New York City, casting a golden glow over the transformed skyline, Sarah looked to the future with hope and determination. The world had changed, and she had changed with it. But her journey, like the never-ending story of human progress, was only just beginning. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.